silakan duduk. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi washabbihi ajmain. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. Salam ilmu, keikhlasan dan kecemerlangan UniMAP. Salam Malaysia Madani. Yang berbahagia Profesor Dr. Insinyur Dr. Nurlida binti Bunyamin, Pengurusi Majlis Akreditasi Teknologi Kejuruteraan ITSC. Yang berusaha Insinyur Megat Johari bin Megat Muhammad Nur, Task Force Leader. Yang berusaha Insinyur Zairul Amri bin Zakaria, Pengarah Jabatan Akreditasi Kejuruteraan Lembaga Jurutera Malaysia. Yang berusaha Profesor Insinyur Dr. Rizal bin Daud, Pengarah Pusat Akademik Universiti Malaysia Perlis. Dekan-dekan, ketua-ketua jabatan fakulti, pensyarah-pensyarah, jawatan kuasa program dan seterusnya, hadirin yang dikasihi sekalian. Selamat datang ke Bengkel Persediaan Bagi Lawatan Penilaian Akreditasi bersama dengan Sydney Accord dan Dublin Accord Reviewers ke Universiti Malaysia Perlis. Seperti yang kita maklum, penilaian akreditasi bagi 5 program diploma kejuruteraan akan dijalankan pada bulan 24-25 hari bulan Oktober 2024 nanti, yang akan melibatkan lawatan daripada panel ITSC BN. Lawatan ini merupakan akreditasi new program bagi program tersebut, yang mana 5 program tersebut sebelum ini telah mendapat akreditasi penuh melalui MQA bagi pelajar yang bergraduat bermula tahun 2018 sehingga 2023. Bagi lawatan kali ini, pihak Engineering Accreditation Department EAD telah memilih UniMAP sebagai salah satu IHL yang mana perwakilan dari Sydney Accord dan Dublin Accord akan turut serta dalam lawatan. Kami difahamkan bahawa perwakilan SA dan DA ini akan hadir sebagai pemerhati dan menilai panel ITSC yang dilantik oleh EAD. Jadi, sebagai persediaan menghadapi lawatan akreditasi ini, pihak EAD berbesar hati untuk mengadakan bengkel yang memberikan panduan serta amalan terbaik untuk UniMAP bagi perkara ini. Yang berbahagia Prof, hadirin sekalian, tanpa membuang masa, majlis diteruskan lagi dengan menjemput dan mempersilakan Yang Berusaha Profesor Insinyur Dr. Rizal bin Daud, Pengarah Pengurusan Akademik, untuk menyampaikan ucapan haluan. Dengan segala hormatnya, majlis mempersilakan.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera. Menjadikan wakil daripada EAD, nama kecil sangat nak baca kat sini. Yang bahagia Prof. Dr. Nurlida Bunyamin, Pengurusi ITEK, dan bersama beliau yang berusaha AR Megat Johari Megat Muhammad Nur, Task Force Leader, khususnya yang berusaha AR Zairul Amri Zakaria, Pengarah Jabatan Akreditasi Kejuruteraan Lembaga Jurutera Malaysia. Khususnya dilalukan rakan-rakan dekan, ketua jabatan, jurutera pengajar dan juga pegawai takbir yang hadir. Pertamanya pihak UniMAP sangat berterima kasih dengan kehadiran wakil daripada sini Dublin Accord, juga daripada EAD, datang ke UniMAP untuk mengadakan satu sesi tiba urus ataupun sesi bengkel, supaya kita semua maklum dengan kehadiran wakil Sydney Dublin Accord nanti untuk akreditasi program di UniMAP. Saya sampaikanlah salam daripada Prof. Syuk, tak dapat hadir bersama kita, namun agenda hari ini kita akan teruskan juga supaya kita semua mendapat manfaat daripada bengkel dan juga lawatan akreditasi yang akan datang. Saya tidak ambil masa banyak. Di pihak UniMAP, sekali lagi kita mengalukan dan berterima kasih dengan kehadiran jemputan. Kita amat berbesar hati untuk bersama-sama menjayakan sesi akreditasi yang akan diri oleh pihak Sydney dan Dublin Accord. Ada perasmian tak ada kan? So saya akhiri ucapan daripada saya dan bila taufiq hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih yang berbahagia Profesor Madia. Yang berbahagia Profesor Madia yang ada di sekalian, bagi memulakan sesi perkongsian bengkel ini, majlis menjemput yang berbahagia Profesor Dr. Insinyur Dr. Nolida binti Buniyami, Pengerusi Majlis Akreditasi Teknologi Kejuruteraan ITSC. Dengan segala hormatnya, silakan.
Terima kasih MC. So saya memulakan. Assalamualaikum semua dan terima kasih Prof. Rosliza. Not someone new to me. Izinkan saya berbahasa Inggeris lah ya. So thank you very much for your welcome today. And you are very important to ETAC kerana you will be part of this accreditation of Malaysia to be able to be renewed our status in SADA. So terima kasih semua kerana mengambil bahagian dalam this very important event at the end. And Prof. Rosliza for leading this. Prof. Rosliza ni saya kenal dah lama lah. Dia salah satu panel kami. Ramai panel di sini. ETAC panel ada ramai? Tak ada? Satu? Okey, dua ya. Okey, mungkin kita akan ada lebih ramai nanti in the future. So hari ini kita ada Prof. Megan Johari. He's here to help you with awareness of SADA. I'm sure all of you know it very, very well. And hopefully we can give a little bit more insight supaya in October it will be smooth and everything runs very, very well. Saya tak nak ambil masa lebih lah lagi. Jadi just a thank you very much for having us here today. And we are very happy to see you and that you are here today to ensure the review in October runs smoothly and we'll get it through very easily. Thank you very much.
Terima kasih kepada yang berbahagia Datuk. Baiklah, majlis diteruskan lagi dengan menjemput yang berusaha Insinyur Muhammad Megat Johari bin Megat Muhammad Noor untuk perbentangan persediaan lawatan akreditasi. Majlis dengan segala hormatnya dipersilakan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning to all. Prof. Rosliza dan saya kira semua rakan-rakan saya di sini ya. Mungkin dah lama saya tak datang ke UniMAP ni. Dan nampak generasi baru di UniMAP. Saya agak ramai yang nampak muda-muda. Tak semua orang kenal saya lah walaupun mungkin yang rakan-rakan saya semua dah bersara Okey, jadi apa yang saya akan cuba lakukan di sini, umpamanya pertama kami tiga orang ini sebenarnya mewakili ETAC, Engineering Technology Accreditation Council yang mana council ini adalah council yang sebenarnya akan mengendalikan semua urusan akreditasi di peringkat bachelor dan juga diploma. Tapi bachelor untuk peringkat Sydney, diploma untuk peringkat Dublin. Tapi hanya satu council sahaja Jadi Prof. Nolida is the chair of this council, and the other important person is Engineer Zairul. Engineer Zairul is the director of the accreditation department at the Board of Engineers Malaysia. Now, the topics that I'll try to cover as much as possible, maybe focusing very much on the IHL, that means the university's role. But probably it is also good that you understand the governance and rules of the SA, NDA, Sydney Accord, as well as the Dublin Accord, and their expectations. because even though when they come here, they are not expected to evaluate you. They come here to evaluate how the process of accreditation is being conducted in Malaysia. So their interest is very much into the evaluators that come here, right? Not you, but the evaluators. So the evaluators probably will be a bit more uptight, probably not comfortable, because the SA and DA people will be overlooking their shoulders, right? But at the same time, they need to make an assessment of the standard of education in Malaysia. So they will be looking at how the evaluators identify and come up with an agreement to say, yes, your standard is there. So in a sense, they are also going to look at how you do things at the university. And they compare with how they do things at their own place. Right? That will be sort of benchmarking against them. Right? So if there are 3 of them coming from 3 different countries, or 4 of them coming from 4 different countries, they are benchmarking what you're doing here against their own country's system. Right? And if it is substantially equivalent, that means to say the standard here and the standard in their home country are about the same, then that will be good enough for them. And if the way that accreditation is being done consistent enough, that means to say we are coming to about 5 programs here, right? So if they come to these 5 programs and they find that all these 5 programs, the evaluators are consistent in what they are doing, right? Identifying real issues or identifying the real situation that happened at this university, then they should be happy about it. But the most important thing is they expect the evaluators to follow the standards, the EVEC standards. And that's why it is also important for you to understand the standards, so that you are at the same wavelength with the evaluators. You know what to expect when they ask questions. But if you don't quite understand the standards, maybe you may be answering a different thing. Right? So that's why this is just an awareness. It is not going to give you very in-depth knowledge about it, but what I intend to do is try to expound something that is what most evaluators would be doing when they come to your universities. It may not be exhaustive in this case, but you are free to ask questions. You can interject anytime you like. Feel free. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I'm not going to touch too much about the SDG, probably 1 or 2 slides if I have time, but we have about until 1 o'clock. But I would prefer if there are a lot more questions from your side rather than me talking in front of you here, one way. I'd like to start off with this purpose and benefits of accreditation. One of the things is accreditation calls for a systems approach. So a systematic way of doing things, right? And you have to meet a certain standards. So there is a standard ETAC standards that you have to meet. And from there, you are able to identify gaps in whatever you are doing here. Because the standard is there, you look at what you're doing, are there any gaps? If there are gaps, let us bridge the gap, right? So that's what the value of accreditation is. And it is very much into outcomes. And with outcomes, there is also elements of improvement. So the approach is that your system here will be looking at continual improvement. That's why if you look at the way that you run things, where is your CQI? Where is your improvement? Right? You've reached a certain level. Then the question is, maybe you've met your KPIs, but the question is, what's the improvement that you have incorporated? Doesn't mean that you meet your targets, you don't have to improve. So the system should allow improvement and you become better and better. Although accreditation is about meeting the minimum, But remember, accreditation is also, when we look at improvement, you cannot be where you are 20 years ago and you're still there. Right? You have to keep on improving. Other thing is that you can actually start implementing best practices where it can be shared from whatever practices from other institutions or other countries and so on. So these are new ideas that you can incorporate. And you can update your facilities. You see, one of the problems with accreditation in the past, or probably still now, with regard to the IHLs, you only start doing it when it is about 1 year before the accreditation visit. You start assembling all the young guys, just came back from their PhDs. Okay, let's work on your self-assessment report. And it's still happening in most universities. The young ones, they call it what? National service. Immediately upon coming back, they have no jobs, not much jobs probably, so let them do it. But actually that is not the best way of doing things, but probably the more convenient things of doing things. But the best way of doing things is you actually update your information yearly, annually. Right? If you look about your facilities, if you don't update, how are you going to know about your situation? If you wait 6 years, things could have run down so badly, and probably you don't even have the funding. And by that time you're saying that, well, we asked for it, we didn't get it. But if you had done a yearly kind of review, you would know your situation better, and it doesn't take 6 years to get things fixed. This is where accreditation helps very much, but internally you need to do that, right? So you can update your facilities yearly, and you update the information yearly as well, and there is financial benefits at the same time. Of course, public universities may say, whatever you do, people will still come to you because the fee is relatively low, right? Whereas private universities probably will benefit much better. But if you approach it systematically, financially, you are much better in the sense you don't wait for things to fail before you correct those things. Teamwork, this is another thing. You have to work in a team. Universities are very good in operating in silos, academic staff especially. We don't cooperate that much, although we expect our students to work in teams. One of the requirements is teamwork, right? But we seldom work as a team, even in our research, right? Or even our teaching, we may not have this co-teaching kind of approaches, right? Working in a team, seldom. So, and very much the KPIs are very much individuals rather than team KPIs. Whereas accreditation is all about bringing the team together. So if you work in a small group or individually, you're not going to be successful, or you're not going to be better than what you are now, right? Okay, how are these actually being materialized? So this is where what we call as the standards provides those guidelines. The procedures are there, and these are actually available on the website of the ETAC. Right? You can just approach them. And the other thing is through the evaluators as well as the institution synergy. I think is important. But one of the things I noticed in the past is that when you get evaluators who are so, I think, quote unquote, rigid, maybe make your life difficult, some universities decided to appoint them as an external examiner so that next time they don't come back to you. But I mean, there are many things that have been done, but what I'm trying to say is that they actually add value to your system. So if they make difficult recommendations, or they make difficult findings for you, but it's actually meant to improve, right? It is nice to get somebody who comes and say everything is fine, but where is the value, right? So what we hope is that it can provide value, but that value is not to an extent that's going to fail you. Right. The other thing I mentioned just now about consistency in decision. So that's, in a nutshell, what accreditation is supposed to do. If it doesn't do all these things, then we should be asking that question. Where the fault is. Is it on ourselves, or is it on the accreditation body, or is it the synergy that we did not manage to get between the two? So let's move on to the Sydney-Dublin Accords. A little bit about the governance and the rules. The governance document is the one that controls everything at the International Engineering Alliance as far as Sydney and Dublin is concerned. Now, I've not explained to you about the structure of the International Engineering Alliance. It is just an alliance of agreements and accords. Forget about the agreements, it is on the professional competencies. This is where related to those who are already working. But let's focus on the accords, which is all about education. Right? It's all about education. That means undergraduates, Bachelors of Engineering, undergraduates, Bachelors of Engineering Technology, and Diploma of Engineering or Engineering Technology. Right? So those are what we say governed by the accords. So Washington Accord looks at Bachelors of Engineering, Sydney Accord looks at Bachelors of Engineering Technology, and the Dublin Accord looks at Diploma of Engineering or Engineering Technology. And the standard at this accord, Washington Accord must not have anything less than 4 years. After 12 years of schooling, Sydney Accord not less than 3 years, not less, just now it was not less than 4 years, it can be more. And then it must be 12 years of schooling as well. And as far as Dublin Accord is concerned, they say not less than 2 years. Sometimes you may ask question, why are they 2 years and we are 2.5? Why are they 3 years and we are 4 years? Remember, the 2 years, the 3 years, and the 4 years, they are meant to capture the knowledge. Right? The knowledge component required. So if we have more skills, then you have to extend it. You have to extend the duration of your program. So that's the reason why these things try to encapsulate everything within that 4 years. What knowledge do you need to bring? So remember, if you're on the Dublin, they talk about the knowledge component of Dublin. There are what? How many of them? 7 or 8? It's 8 now, right? So that's the knowledge that you have to provide. And that knowledge actually allows you to actually deal with the skills as well at a high level. That's the expectation. So if you need to put in a lot more skills within the curriculum, right, more than what the knowledge can provide, then it will have to be extended further. And that's the reason why ETAC has these 4 years for the Bachelors of Engineering Technology and 2.5 years for Diploma of Engineering or Engineering Technology. Right? But we really focus on this knowledge, not too much on the skill, then it can be much less. Right? So the agreement is about substantial equivalent, as I mentioned. It is about the academic requirements here for the practice of engineering. So it is more of academic requirements. So if you talk about academic requirements, it's about the knowledge, isn't it? For practice of engineering. It doesn't matter whether Washington, Sydney, or Dublin. And here they say you must have criteria, policies, and procedures. That means ETAC must have this. So we cannot just say, we have a body, but we don't have criteria, we don't have policies, or we don't really have a robust procedures and so on. and they would like to see how we make decision. These are the things that they're looking for when they come here. But of course, their focus is on ETAC, right? But the context is you. The focus is on ETAC, but the context is you. When this representative comes from ETAC to accredit your program. That's how it works, right? And of course, ETAC should be inviting others to come and have a look. And this review is part of the occasion where other countries who are part of the signatories are able to see your system, right? And then, but one thing is that accreditation is limited to the boundaries of the jurisdiction. So if it is accredited in Malaysia, right, it is only valid in Malaysia, but recognized by all the signatories. But what happens when a program, let's say accredited by ETAC, let's say we go to Spain and we accredit the program in Spain, that accreditation is only valid in Malaysia, but the signatories do not have to accept equivalency. They don't have to recognize that qualification. This is what is meant by within the boundaries of the jurisdiction only, right? So recognition is only if the program is within the jurisdiction accredited by ETAC itself, right? And the same thing happens with the other countries. So we only recognize qualification accredited within those jurisdictions. So that's substantially equivalent. And for Sydney and Dublin, it is slightly less rigorous compared to Washington. That's why you don't have to be too tense, right, when it comes to Sydney and Dublin, because 90% of the votes will be counted as favorable for you to get into Sydney or Dublin, right? But with Washington, it must be 100%. Everybody must agree. But with Sydney and Dublin, it's only 90%. So you can afford to have one country not agreeing with the rest. So it is much less, one would say, less stringent in terms of the way that they bring in the signatories. A little bit about the definitions. Here, about the conditional status. Now, for example, the Board of Engineers is granted the full signatory status. I think that was in 2017. That was the first time. And this is the second round. Of course, we had some extended period, mainly because of COVID and so on. So this is the second round. They are coming to visit us, or rather the third, after the first provisional, and then we had the full signatory verification. Now is the third, what we call as the periodic review. So after this is all about periodic review every 6 years. But let's say there is a significant deficiency. That means there's a breakdown in the system, really. They will then relegate us to the conditional status. If these things could be repaired within a short period of time. They give you 2 years. You need to do all the necessary correction or corrective action before they bring you back to the full signatory status, or they could actually decline everything. That means to say you are out of the system. That means all our qualification after that will not be considered as equivalent. So that is the seriousness of the Sydney and Dublin Accord review that's coming to Malaysia. It could mean that we could lose that substantial equivalency or recognition at the international level. Okay, and when they come here, I did mention about consistency. They are also looking at robustness. I think if you would talk about robustness, what do we mean by robust? That means the system is well tested, right? In a sense, everything is all being adhered to. You follow the rules, and you make difficult decisions. They would like to see you make difficult decisions, right? Doesn't mean that you have to fail people, but because when you make difficult decisions, there are a lot of conditions that you have to weigh them, right? And if you decided to give, probably it has a severe impact on something else. But you have to make that decision, and your system should allow that to take place, right? So that's the sort of things that they're looking at. So that if your system is really robust, then that means to say they will have confidence that you will be doing the right thing. But of course, this is only a snapshot, right? We may be robust during that time, not later or before. The same thing in universities, bukan? They are robust during the accreditation visit. Maybe 2 or 3 years they are a bit more relaxed, and when the next cycle comes, they become more prepared, right? But we can't afford at the ATAC, because not only we have that 6 years review, but there are others who will be coming, and at the same time we will be mentoring others. So if our system is not good, how could we do and tell others to follow suit, right? Okay, the thing is here, for the IHL, the most important thing is you can be identified as having the breadth and depth. It will be very undesirable, or something that shouldn't happen if suddenly the evaluator says you lack breadth and depth of your curriculum. Because if that is the, let's say, the final recommendation, we can forget about the rest. If you don't have the breadth and depth, you can forget about the rest. You may have an excellent outcome-based system, you may have an excellent improvement system, everything all excellent, excellent lecturers, excellent everything, but your breadth and depth is not there. I remember at one time somebody said, we developed our curriculum using Cambridge curriculum. But the question was, is your academic Cambridge? Is your student Cambridge standard? Yes, your curriculum is Cambridge standard. Is your question Cambridge standard? And so on. So that's why when we talk about benchmarking and so on, it is not about just the curriculum. It's about the whole environment. Then only you can start to improve. So we can have the best curriculum to adopt, but that doesn't give us to be the best university, right? Or among the best university. So the lack of breadth and depth you must make sure that it doesn't happen at your place. These are what there's a big no for that. The other thing is about incompetent academics. Now, academics are not incompetent really, but they are seen as incompetent if, remember, your job, by virtue that you are here teaching, is one of your core areas. Because there are research and consultancy and so on, but teaching is one of your core areas. If you don't understand outcome-based, you don't implement them, you are incompetent. And by right, you are here because the students are here. Right? If the students are not here, you can't even be doing research, because your existence is not really required. It is an institution of higher learning, and because the students are here, you need to teach them. Teaching and learning is very important, but of course your promotion is through your research. And any institution for that matter, if they are offering a bachelor's degree, they must be conducting research. And that's the reason, if you see why research is being emphasized for an undergraduate curriculum as well. Right? But if you're not a university, it's okay for not doing research. But of course, don't forget about your core areas of teaching and learning. So when I say incompetent here, it is more of you are not able to really apply those outcome-based, getting the students to be able to solve, in this particular case, if it is DUBLIN, well defined. It's not so difficult, isn't it? But if you understand that standard, well defined, what does it mean? Then it will solve a lot of problems. Okay, as far as ETAC is concerned, we are looking at our evaluators must not be inconsistent, always consistent. Maybe 5% risk that may happen that they are not consistent, but that's what ETAC has to ensure. So coming to your 5 programs here, we will find that yes, are they all consistent? For example, if they say safety at the library is compromised, let's say. Library, everybody goes to the library. Although maybe nowadays people don't go to libraries, they go to their computers. But that's a common area. And suddenly only one program gets it. There is an inconsistency within, or that means between the evaluators. Library is common, so everybody will get it because it's common. Then you are consistent. Right? Sometimes you are saying, why the evaluators didn't say at the pre-exit meeting, suddenly you got it. That's because of consistency when it comes to making sure that it is consistent between all the reports. Alright, and of course any non-conformance. You see, our standards, if you look at the standards, we have a weakness, that is a big no. Any weakness means you will be declined accreditation or deferred accreditation. But if you have major or minor concern, or you have only opportunity for improvements, means to say you will get your accreditation. So you have to avoid a weakness here, which is meant to be really a system breakdown. So it must be very bad if a system breaks down. And a system is seen to be breaking down if, let's say, you have one criterion. Suddenly you have 20 concerns. What does it mean? It's so extensive, isn't it? So like everything breaks down, that means one criterion breaks down, then it could mean a weakness for you. Right? It is a matter they group it as a major concern and so on. But imagine so many things breaking down within one criterion, it can lead you to a weakness. Right? Okay, I'll just skip this because we are already a signatory. Let's move further. So in the process, they say you must have a self-review. There must be an on-site. That's the reason why we need to have a self-assessment report, even for ourselves and your side. Right? So not just you having self-assessment. ETAC must have a self-assessment. Then there must be an on-site review. You cannot say, let's do a desktop review. There must be an on-site. Yeah? And periodic re-evaluation will be done as well. So we are being reviewed periodically. You are also being reviewed periodically. So tak bolehlah kata nak ETAC ni dia datang tengok orang dia tak ada orang tengok dia. It's different with ETAC. There are people looking at us and we are looking at you. So that process is equally balanced in that sense. And we have to prepare a report, you have to prepare a report as well. Right? Decision, they will have to make a decision like we make decision on you. Right? They are also looking at how consistent we are and what is our standard. Right? So then, having said that, there's not much difference between you and ETAC. Both are being reviewed. Right? It's just that you are being reviewed by ETAC, ETAC is being reviewed by Sydney and DUBLIN, for that matter. And we are also being reviewed by people who are also used to a similar system. And we can benefit from them, and they could also benefit from us. They could also see some of our best practices. We could also learn their best practices. Of course, some people do not like change, but then, well, change is very necessary in many cases, right? If we want to improve. Let's look at the review team. The review team coming from Sydney, the chair will be coming from the academy. Right? That means to say he may be a professor, he may be an associate professor, it's an academic. Right? So he knows the system at the university. He knows the education system. The other one will be also from the academy or and from the industry. What do you think these people from the industry will be looking for? What do you think? You have an academic, you have an industry. Someone that similarly our panels will be one from the industry, one from the academy. What do you think these industry people will be looking for? Some people say, they come and just look at our safety, how we manage our safety at these institutions and so on. But more often, at the international level, these industry players, they are actually looking at your questions, your assessment questions that you give to your students. Are they really applicable to the industry needs? Are they about giving the standard that the industry needs? That is what they would be focusing on. Not just about safety, not about facilities. Yes, they may be looking at those, but more importantly, whether your assessment is to that level they would expect required by the industry. Because these are the people who are going to work in the industry. And if your assessment is not assessing to the depth that the industry needs, that's where they come in. That's why you say, yeah, it's all well defined, but the industry does not look as such. It is well defined. Right? And that's the very reason when you develop your curriculum, you always like to see your stakeholders' involvement from the industry, especially. Looking at your curriculum and possibly even involved in the way that you conduct your assessment. Right? So then you can start seeing that effort actually gives the output, the product that you get at the end of the day, is about what the industry wants. It is very important when it comes to Sydney and Dublin. Yeah? Or you may get both from the industry. I had my own experience at one time. I was chairing a team. Both of the evaluators they were from the industry. Right? And I was the only academic, so of course I can say anything I like. They cannot say no to the academic. But these two industry people, when they go in, that's what they were doing. Right? They were not just looking at, where's your fire institution? No, they don't. Right? Maybe a passing walk and so on. It happens that they see it. But more often they were looking at the assessment. So remember, your assessment is your face. If you have a bad assessment, it tells you that it is not good on behalf of the university. And that's why, and we know all the while about constructive alignment, isn't it? You plan, finally you assess. So if you know what is the end, you can make a good planning, isn't it? But problem is that we plan, but we never look at the end. And that's why we get lost when it comes to assessment. So let's bring that concept, constructive alignment, where you know the end and then you can project it back. You see, yeah, we've done the right planning. Right? Always, and this is what we talk about CQI, isn't it? Going back to review what you had actually planned, and you achieved it, right? Now, can we now go a higher level? That's why in universities, you may get certain students of a certain level, right? And there are times there are better students coming into your system. Are you going to not challenge them? When you got better students, are you going to give the minimum? No, because their expectation when they come into university, they are supposed to be challenged. Right? Doesn't mean that, you know, if they are really extra bright student, you say, I don't have to teach. Because they are already extra bright, they will get everything. No, you have to still challenge them. Right? And that's what education is all about, challenging the students. That's why accreditation is just the minimum standard. It is all about you designing a curriculum for an average student, right? But if you do get better students, you still have to challenge them in your assessment, right? Or even in your classes. So as far as the academic staff are concerned, that means to say those coming from the academe, they will be looking very much into the curriculum. They look at, you know, the outcomes. You know, they are very interested to know whether you can demonstrate attainment of outcomes. They will be interested to talk to your students in terms of how the outcomes were materialized. Really, they are not there. Okay, one thing that you must remember: the evaluators is not going to be like you. What does it mean? They're not going to ask students, you know, can you solve this problem? They're not going to ask students that. Right? They want to know, for example, let's say they find out, now I'm giving you one of the Sydney Accord examples here. Or rather, no, it's better that I give you Washington Accord, it becomes more distinct. Because Washington Accord is about complex problem. That means to say students have to solve complex problem. But when the evaluators was interviewing the students, the question asked was, the project looks complicated. It looks complicated. Because they were supposed to convert a motorcycle, right, which using this two-stroke engine and fossil fuel, they wanted these students doing this final year project to convert to renewable energy. Right? Is it a complex problem? Is it a complicated problem? Students were not exposed to, they may be exposed to motorcycles and everything, but now they have to make sure that it is powered by renewable energy. Then the student did it, and did it very well. But the question was, what have you considered? What had you considered when you were solving that problem? What we did was we went to the YouTube, we saw everything how it was done, and we did it. So it was solving complicated problem, but not solving complex problem. Because all those considerations were not taken in. Right? It was just replicating what was done in the YouTube. Of course, they got it done. But the thinking process was not there. And that's what education is, isn't it? You have to develop that thinking process. All those considerations needs to be done. Similarly, when we talk about well-defined as well as broadly defined. What is the thinking process? So it's not just about taking a standard and do it. What will be the thinking process when you are using the standards? That's the most important thing. It's not just about looking at the YouTube and do it. Right? You can use the YouTube and do everything, you get it. But you cannot become a dentist, you cannot become a medical doctor. You can pull people's teeth and so on, but you're really not qualified because you don't understand the principles and everything behind it. And of course, you may look competent, but you are not really, because competency is being assessed by the knowledge that you have, not by the skills that you have. Right? So this is important. The other thing I mentioned about industry, they will be looking at competencies from the point of view of your assessment. Of course, they will be looking at safety and so on. And it is more of industry relevant assessment, as I mentioned just now. So what will be the focus really, these people, when they come in? They come in and they would like to see that ETAC is an independent, not influenced by. Sebab apa, some countries ni, you may have an accrediting body, but they are influenced by some other powers that way. Right? They can change the decision because somebody tells them to change. Right? So they are looking at that to make sure that it is really an independent entity making decision. It is about robust system. They like to see the system is robust, as I mentioned just now, adhering to all the procedures and making difficult decisions. And finally, in our case here, Sydney or Dublin, they would like to see where are the broadly defined problems being addressed or the well-defined problems being addressed. So at the end of the day, whatever your students are getting, they could be seen solving those problems, able to solve the problems at that level. Yeah? It's not just good enough to say, yeah, we have a system, so the system tells us that it is done. So you, as an academic staff individually, should know that. Right? It's not all about the system. The system may be facilitating things, but what is it when it comes to you? Because you will be evaluated, you will be interviewed by the panel, and they will ask you questions, right? But if you could not identify, all those, associate them with the, you see, evaluators, they sometimes use keywords. They listen to the keywords and then they will probe further based on those keywords, right? I mean, they will have to make that decision on the spot, really. So it's difficult for them as well. So they listen to some of your keywords and they'll start to probe. So if you don't quite understand them, probably it's going to be difficult for them to also understand you, right? So you have to understand yourself first before you can make them understand. Yeah? And then what this Sydney and Dublin person will be doing is that they will come and observe in silence. They're not going to talk to you, right? Don't worry. At most they will say hi, hello, and so on. But they're not going to interject during the evaluation visit. They will observe in silence. That is a code of practice for any reviewers coming from Sydney and Dublin. As much as they wanted to say something, they will have to be silent. But the most, in some cases, if let's say the chair, that means the local chair, the panel from ETAC may say, what do you think, our senior court representative? Then only they will come in. But as it is, complete silence. And most of the time, you will see them just taking down notes. Yeah? Not doodling, taking down notes. Okay, so then they look at consistency, they will regroup. They will always regroup and ask each other, what do you think of this? How has it been practiced in your place and so on? And then they start to reflect and make judgment as they go along. And that's how, by the end of the meetings, they will have almost everything to be reported, but not finalized, of course, but at least they have all the information. Now, what I like to highlight to you here is the differences between Washington, Sydney, and Dublin. Because some of your evaluators may have this experience from Washington, or from Sydney, or from Dublin, but then evaluating Dublin level. If you see that they probably forgot their hats, right? That they are wearing the wrong hat on that day, you could actually sort of discuss that with them, isn't it? Because if you know your facts better, let's say, isn't that required at the Washington Court level? We are at Dublin. But if you do not know the difference, it's going to be very difficult for you to say that, right? Okay, let's see what it is. Let's say we have this line here, a diagonal line, whereby above the line is all about skills, and below the line, some of you may have seen this. Below the line is all about knowledge, right? So you have that axis. My left hand side is about skills, and on my right hand side is about knowledge, right? And if you see the range of engineering programs between those two axes, right? If it is engineering, this is a schematic diagram only, right? If it is engineering, I mean that line may be a curve, right? Or that line may be an S curve, but I'm just having a straight line, and then I put a domain called engineering. If you are producing, let's say, bachelors of engineering, right, then you'll find that the amount of skills required in your curriculum is limited, low. In those days, they say if you can get 5% to 10%, that was good enough, which was your laboratories. The rest are all mostly knowledge. And if you remember, if you go for your masters, I don't think any one of you would have gone to the labs. It's all classroom, and maybe there are one or two labs, but most of it tends to be very much knowledge-based. So if you go right to the end, it's all totally knowledge. Most likely, you are doing masters, right? But if you're doing bachelors, there will be some elements of skills in there. But if you're doing engineering technology at the Sydney Accord level, that's different. You have more practice-oriented there, right? As compared to the knowledge, compared to the Washington Accord level. So Sydney is going to have more practice-oriented. Then comes the Dublin, even more practice-oriented, right? But of course, if you go to the apprentice usually will have more skills. They may even start without knowledge and build up their knowledge as they go along. They become master craftsmen, right? Which is close to having a diploma, or even better than the diploma students, because they build their knowledge as they build their skills over time, right? So as you progress to my right hand side, you'll find that what makes you having the knowledge of engineers, right, as you go along. Okay? Now, what happens when engineering technology want to become engineering? So they have more, probably they are trying to reach having complex problem being addressed, broadly defined being addressed. Then you start to see them as evaluators. They are now sensing, are you solving complex problem, or are you really solving broadly defined? But what could have happened is that this particular university may say, I want to produce super engineers, good in skill, good in knowledge. That means you have the best of both worlds, but you cannot have the best of both worlds in 4 years. Right? So it's impossible. But you can have the best of both worlds in 5 years, in 6 years, yes. Right? That's why in Germany you have to go for 5 years and more, right? For you to be able to get that. Now let's look at engineering technologies moving to technician level. So they want to have more skills incorporated. So there is always the danger that they may actually, at the end of the day, be doing mostly well-defined problems. Right? And similarly, engineers, the engineering program may be leaning towards engineering technology. There is always a danger of overlapping over there, where they may not become engineering, but rather it is engineering technology. So these are the possibilities. If we are not careful, we're not looking specifically at those areas. All right. Let's go to the what are the issues of concern when it comes to SAD? Are we going to have a break? What time are we supposed to have a break? I'm talking alone here, nobody is interjecting. I presume there's a break sometime. Is it what, 10:30? Or I'm okay, I can stay up here until tonight. No problem. I've been doing that well, in those days, maybe not at this age.
Cuma kita tiada break, kita teruskan.
Ada break? Oh, okay.
Dengan
It's good for me, but not good for you, I suppose. You need to stand up, stretch yourself. Tapi tak apalah kot.
Tuan, ada permintaan daripada peserta. Mungkin 10.30 kita break, 5 minit atau 10 minit.
Stretch break is good. Maybe it allows you to recollect your thoughts and have more questions. Okay. Let's look at the reviewers' issues and concern. Virtual is good, but very taxing. That means if we do have a virtual visit, which happens during COVID, no one of the evaluators were satisfied. They were exhausted. So was the university, presumably. And we cannot see many things if it is not on site. Right? So decision may not be that good. The other thing is about communication. Now this is an issue. So when they come to these universities, these people are supposed to be well versed with and they can converse in English, but they cannot converse in Malay. Right? And some of us prefer to speak in Malay. Some of us can speak English. Some of us may speak colloquial Malay, and so on. Bahasa Kedah kan? Some of the panels pun tak faham bahasa Kedah. Kelantan may be more difficult kot pada Kedah lah. Kedah dia punya adalah one of few words. But communication is one area. And that's why countries like Saudi Arabia, maybe India, now India does that in English. Some countries where China or Korea or Japan, they use their national language, so they have to translate the documents, the major documents, of course, not all the assignments and so on, but sample assignments, had to be translated because these will be used by the reviewers. We don't have that problem, I presume. All your assessments are in English, isn't it? Right. But the oral communication sometimes is not in English. Even let's say when our evaluators ask questions to the student, students may answer in Malay, or students, or even admin staff. It's fine, you can continue to answer in the language that you are more comfortable with. Then ETAC will have to provide some kind of translation along the way, right? They must not be sort of aloof from the discussion. Right? So communication is something of an issue. So preferably we can speak English, but if we are more comfortable in speaking Malay, let's say, then go ahead, because if you can convey your ideas better, then do it. But the onus will be on ETAC to say otherwise. Maybe it's easier for ETAC to translate and paint a better picture, I don't know. But the fact is, that's how it is. They will have to be dependent very much on the ETAC on that day. If the communication, especially talking to students and talking to the administrative staffs, not all of them are comfortable. I think all academic staff has no problem with that because you're teaching in English anyway, right? And all the assessment there. And then the other thing is that they get confused if information are all scattered, right? And especially if they see that universities are not prepared, information is not made available easily. So this is something that they will notice, right? or asking for information, it doesn't come. But it's better that it doesn't come than when it comes very warm. When it comes very warm, you could be fabricating it. So it's better that it doesn't come at all. But the fact is that information must be made available, easily accessed. Doesn't mean that it has to be in hard copies. It can be in soft copies, but they would like to see it being made available. The other thing is that they will be focusing on broadly defined and well defined. Broadly for the Sydney, well defined for the Dublin. They are going to ascertain. Is that the level that you have reached? That is what they have to report when they go back. If they themselves don't understand what is well defined, then you will be in trouble. But of course, they will pick someone who knows. But sometimes you may get somebody who had done Washington Accord to look at the bill. You could. So again, that's an issue of having different hats that they have to switch. Planning. They have to do proper planning, and it's an issue as well because it's only a short period of time. They have to plan to strategize how they could approach it. And the other thing is about they will be looking at our evaluators, whether they are trained evaluators, right? Because from the questioning and the way that they deal with you here, they would know whether these people are well trained or not. If they keep on asking stupid questions, then they know that our evaluators are all stupid, something like that. So evaluators must know. That's why evaluators are a bit more tense when they come, right? Aplomb and decorum is a very important aspect here. There are cases when an evaluator, what will you do when an evaluators come and he is very argumentative, right? Are you going to respond being argumentative? Because if you do, it's going to explode. It's not good for the evaluators, but it's not going to do any benefit for the university as well. So it is best that you don't go and pick a fight, right? You know that he is probably not having the right decorum. You can leave it as that because you have the director to complain to and so on. Don't continue and pick up that fight, even though he sort of dares you to pick up the fight. Right? So this is what we say aplomb and decorum. The evaluators must have the right decorum in the way that they exhibit, and with the confidence, the aplomb, the confidence that they exhibit and so on, they must exhibit those things. But you on the other side, don't think that they are the king. And sometimes we look to them so high up, as if that they don't make any mistakes and they dictate everything. No, we are peers. We are at the same level, right? And that's the reason why during the accreditation visit, right, you shouldn't be standing up while he's sitting down and trying to explain things to him or her. That is not the decorum, really. You should be sitting down together, right, and explain. You are at the same level. Or if you stand, he should be standing. That's the sort of decorum when it comes to dealing with the evaluation process. It's a peer evaluation, really. Right? So don't think of them as kings or queens, they don't make mistakes and you have to bow to them all the time, or curtsy. Right? The other thing is, they would like to see institution at the threshold level. Threshold means they do not want to see the best of the universities in Malaysia, because they know the best of the university probably will be of a certain level, right? But they would like to see a threshold, not the bottom, but threshold. if the threshold university meets their requirement, then majority of us will be meeting the requirements. It's not the average, but the threshold. And that's why it makes life difficult for the director to sort of come out with the kind of institution, the kind of program. Not only that, I mean, there are so many limitations, but that's something that we shouldn't be fielding our best, right? That's what they're saying. But if it's not available, we still have to do it, then we have to do it. That's one of the things that they're saying, that you must have at least 2 institutions. UniMAP is one for Dublin. The other one for Dublin is going to be MIATS. And they need 2 universities, and each university must have 2 programs at least. You have 5, more than what they need. So it will be a field day for them to see how consistent we are in that 5. But when they need a minimum of only 2. Alright, the other thing is they are interested in how we implement our outcomes. But one of the things that I noticed, sometimes the evaluators may be asking your students, do you understand what is outcome based? Then your students come up with a note. Outcome based is A, because they start to see, students forgot to take out the notes. But actually, we are not looking for them to define what is outcome based. What we want to know is whether the lecturers understand outcome based, because you are the one who's going to implement on them. Right? If they don't understand outcome based, they can answer your question. That's good enough, isn't it? Because you had designed it based on outcomes. But if they don't understand what is the outcome, it doesn't matter. But if they know their progress, that is good enough. But if they know about outcomes, probably that is a wow factor, right? Because both parties understand equally well, right? So, but sometimes our evaluators are also at fault, asking them, can you define outcome based, or what do you understand by outcome based? But it is not really required for students. But it will be required, for example, if an evaluator identify where is sustainable development being addressed, right? And he couldn't find it anywhere, even though you may say there is a particular course assigned to do it, but he could not find it anywhere. There is no assessment telling that sustainable development had taken place. What they will do is, they will talk to the students. They will ask you, what about in your classes, for the last 3 years you were here, that sustainability had been addressed. The worst case that may have happened is, what? Sir, may I know what do you mean by sustainability? Sudahlah kan. Dia pun tak tahu apa dia. Then that's one point. Then we go to the lecturers. Whom among you actually addressed this issue of sustainability? Maybe 3 of them put up their hands and say, okay, let's discuss. What do you mean by that? And how do you assess? So that is the triangulation process. Before we say you don't have, you could not demonstrate. But then as you say, you have it, the last question, can you show us? What's your proof? Your proof is always in your assessment, isn't it? So if you cannot show your assessment, you cannot prove anything. It's just hearsay. It's in the syllabus, yes. But it is in the syllabus, but not assessed means you cannot show proof it has been done. Then they will start to say, the planning is there, but there is no evidence to say that sustainability was actually addressed. It doesn't sound good, isn't it? But that's the triangulation process. We look at the students, we look at you, we look at assessment. That's what triangulation is. Okay? So outcome based you need to be able to show your evidence. And they have to be when it comes to issue of politics, issue of culture and so on, they must not go overboard in querying about culture and politics. So they are not going to ask you, about PMX. They are not going to ask you about all those things. What do you think of the country political scenario, or what do you think with these multiracial countries? Are you? They're not going to ask those questions. They are not supposed to. They are supposed to be as neutral as possible when it comes to politics and culture. They need to respect the politics and culture of each country. Security could be an issue. They may not want to come if we are not a secure nation, like what happened in Pakistan years ago. Nobody wants to come. So how are you going to evaluate when they don't come? So in the end, the Pakistanis say, let us ferry you with a helicopter. It's very safe. Safe from the terrorists probably, but doesn't mean that it's going to, it's not going to fall. So, but then actually, during one of the verification visits in Pakistan, they had the helicopter ride from Islamabad to the northern frontier. The evaluators were actually ferried by helicopter. So it is not something strange when it comes to security, because if they decided not to come because of security, we are not going to be evaluated, so we may be in a limbo. Other challenges here, our SADA reviewers' challenges are more of, they need to arrive at the conclusions to say, we are confident of your standards. If they don't, what's going to happen? For example, I had this one situation in India. We visited 2 institutions, each of them having 2 programs. Both institutions, one failed, one actually almost failed. Now, had both failed, we wouldn't have any evidence to say that the standard is there. How can you say the standard is there when, even though the evaluators from India keep to a certain standard, but we could not see the university maintaining that standard? Because both of them, well, one failed completely, the other one failed one program, but the other program just managed to scrape through. So at least you can see the standard. Before this, you were thinking, never mind if your evaluators are all straight, then doesn't matter if everybody fails, but the country will not fail. No, because we cannot identify what is the standard really. See, so it is not something straightforward as that, right? So things have changed along the way. So the evaluators have to come back and see other universities. So it's not going to be an end to the end for the those visits, but you'll have more of those visits coming to satisfy them. Okay? So we are already at 10:30. I think that's a nice place to stop probably. There's no coffee, just some drinks. It was meant to be until 1 p.m. I feel like you can stand up. I think, is it going to be 5 minutes, 10 minutes? You can walk out, stretch yourself. Right? And I hope when we come in, we're going to get more. We're going to have some questions. Okay,
kita berehat selama 10 minit. 10 minit. Kita akan sambung. Terima kasih.
Aku kalau jumpa apa komen dulu nak kutip. Yang penting lagi dia tu. Lagu dia tu. Itu yang penting. Aku tak boleh ya. Dia lambat kata motak apa.
Okey, baik, kita teruskan dengan sambungan fikir kita. Silakan baik yang berusaha berceramah.
Okay. Ada apa soalan sebelum kita sambung? Ni student belakang Kita tak ada soalan lagi. Ni student kat depan tak ada tanya soalan pula Okey, tu belakang salah, tu depan tu salah Alright. Anyway, let's continue. The reviewers' challenges, that means to say, what are the challenges that they are facing to arrive at the confidence level, and the other thing is to differentiate the standards here, to see whether is it engineering or engineering technology or is it the technician level. So those are the things that would be a difficult thing for many, And that's the reason why they say a robust system will have a mechanism that allows you to make difficult decisions. Because to differentiate the three can be difficult and quite subtle in some cases. But what may happen during the visit? This is like Murphy's Law. What may happen? I mean, you may have prepared everything, but on that day, everything falls down. Murphy's Law. If he has to fail, he will fail. So you need to do that preparation, no matter how. But it had happened to an institution that everything failed on that day. When we, for example, when we visited the lab, the technician was actually in charge. And then the way that it is being conducted it wasn't meant to be visited, right? But somehow the reviewer was passing by, looking at the facility, and overheard. This is where Murphy's Law comes in. How the technician actually guided the students. You plug in A and B into the respective points. What do you see? So it sounds so low level. Probably even technicians is not doing that. We would expect them to not to tell the students plug here and plug there, isn't it? They probably would have designed the experiment before that. So that was one. And then when they start talking to the academic staff, the sort of research that they are doing, although no one asks about their research, but they volunteer their research. Right? Sometimes, there are ways and means to sort of waste time. Time wasters, we call these people. They might want to talk about something, at the end distracting the evaluators from doing their job. The worst thing is when they talk about their families. I've got 3 children and all of them are engineers and 2 of them are studying in this university. I have confidence in this sort of things, right? So that's actually time wasting. Right? So trying to get conversation on. But this one particular case, the explanation, nobody asked to show about what your research is all about. The person wanted to mention this is the sort of research that I do. And those research were very, very much more innovative rather than anything else, probably. There's no new principles in there. And so it gives another impression. So finally they say, you probably are not producing engineers. But these were all unplanned. And then they look at the assessment, they were not there. That makes it reinforce everything. But it fails on that day because something that was not planned, but sometimes you wanted to show more than, or we wanted to extend a bit the time and so on. And these were the things that were done in those days a lot. For example, lunchtime. The panel will say during lunchtime is going to be working session, working lunch. And then kita bawa apa? Laksa Johor ke, laksa Perlis ke. So dia nak makan, kena berhenti kerja Dia tak boleh musik Whereas expectation working means while you are eating probably you are still working, and sometimes you may even ask questions or you discussing private session and so on, right? But I remember in the early days, university memang dia sebab dia raih all these people, right? Let's have, kalau musim harum manis, let's have harum manis dekat ladang mana-mana kan. So to drive to that ladang is already 20 minutes kan. Sementara tu nak makan another 20 minutes. Dah habis borak-borak lagi kan. By the time you come back, it's already past your lunchtime, past your session. So tak payah tanya banyak soalan lah kan. those were quite rampant in the early days. What we call as time wasters. Although sebenarnya the intention was good and trying to give the best to the evaluators, but it actually indirectly wasting time, and that's the very reason why we would like to see during the visits, time is maintained very well by the panel and the university. So if you see the panel is wasting their time too much on certain areas, they are supposed to move into the next area, please tell them. Right? That's why you have a liaison person, It's good to tell them, well, time's up, or maybe 5 minutes, you're going to have our maybe stakeholders coming in. Do it nicely, it can be done, right? Interject at the right point, so that time is not wasted. Okay, change of guard is another problem, whereby different people have different ideas sometimes, and new ones. I would say new broom sweeps everything. So whatever it is, you may not be lucky enough sometimes when you get new brooms. You get them to sweep everything, every single thing. Although we would expect quite a challenge when it comes to evaluators who are very new coming in, right? And they will want to put everything in there, rather than saying, okay, I'm going to just mention it orally. Right? I'm not going to write it down and so on. Right? So you're going to get a mix of that, right? So especially when you have a change of guards. Okay. On the evaluation day, there is the opening meeting. Now, one of the things that the university normally do, try to present as long as possible. But actually, what do you need to present really to these evaluators? Because whatever you wanted to present, they are already in the self-assessment report, isn't it? So what presentation are you going to make? So if you really want to make an impression during the presentation, it should be your wow factors. What is your wow factors? That's your strength, isn't it? Now, evaluators come there, they have only 2 days to identify your strength. And most likely they could only identify your strength from your report, which sometimes you do not write it in such a way that's your strength. And it's quite mundane, it looks quite monotonous in the report. But never say what is your strength in there. So it's difficult for them to pick up your strength when you yourself could not identify your strength, or not willing to identify your strength. Right? So take this opportunity in your presentation to highlight what your strength are. But remember, strength in this case, not just one person got the Agong's award and so on, right? But it should be extensive enough, applied to many. Not necessarily all, but to a sizable number, or the move towards that, from a small to now you are consolidating, getting a bigger base and so on. I mean, you need to highlight those things, right? So that's the important thing about the opening meeting. But of course, the most important at the opening meeting, the evaluator is going to ask you, I'm giving you tips now, is about finance, is about the budget, right? That you're going to get, the support that the program is going to get. Right? So is it getting that support? Really? What institutional support is being provided to the program? Right? That's a very important topic normally at the opening meeting, where your Vice Chancellor or your Deputy Vice Chancellor, they're going to have to respond. Right? What sort of budget is given? But then from there, when we go into the accreditation, suddenly we say, everybody saying, we don't have any budget. We don't have budget. We don't have budget. And yet, at the opening meeting, we've already 5 million allocated for development in this area and so on, right? triangulation. We go down, further down, right? When we probe, if it is there, fine. Right. But we say, yeah, the money is there, but we could not spend. That's not a good reason. Right? Then we meet the staff members on the evaluation day. Most of the time, for example, now we're going to start off with reviewing your documents. But in the process of reviewing your documents, we may ask the academic staff to come, please explain to us about this. Even though it's a private session, we could actually invite, for example, if I'm looking at course A, I say, maybe the lecturer is teaching this course A, could you get him to come in? We need some discussion on this course, right? That's how it works. Because this is part of trying to ascertain from the person point of view and what is written, right? And of course, then looking at others, at the end we can come to a conclusion to say, yeah, is it extensive or is it isolated case or what? Yeah. And yes. Yeah, it is okay provided you have the facility for them to access. Well, I think most evaluators may have their own computer and so on, but you may have restricted access. Like some universities, I remember we went to Curtins or Swinburne, they give you an iPad to use for the day. Everything is all accessible. You could do that. Or the evaluators can have access to your SharePoints. But I think these things, please make prior arrangements so that they are not caught by surprise on that day as well. So when you know that visit is going to take place, you can tell the director, yeah, because I'm sure the head of delegation will be asking for all this. That communication probably will take place but it's good to tell them that all our documents are actually in soft copy, and make sure they are accessible, and preferably they are even accessible before the visit. Because you see, the more you restrict to the visit day, right, the less time they have, and probably they may be making a wrong decision because the samples that they get may be limited. So it's not good as far as you are concerned, isn't it? But then they can't be seeing everything. They are going to sample. If you have 10, they may sample all. But if you have 20, they may pick and choose from that 20. Right? So, because the time is the limit. But if you provide them in advance, probably it helps you further in the sense that if they are able to go through to as many before they come. But one thing is that, whatever the case, don't tell the evaluators, these are all our documents, just go through it, solve it yourself. Right? I know you have all the information, but if you make life easy, so that they can navigate through all those documents, that should be the case, isn't it? So for example, if you are saying, I'm looking at this thread of, let's say, final year project, get that thread carefully designed so that the documents are easily traceable. And when a person comes as well, person responsible for your final year project and so on, they can explain easily because they can show all the relevant documents. So if you make life easy for the evaluators, they will make life easy for you as well. But if you make it difficult, then they cannot find the information. They will say it is not visible. As simple as that. Yeah? Right. Then when during the battle, you say, no, we have the document, but you didn't show the document on that day. Tapi kita terima juga lah kan. Tapi susah lah kan. Towards the end, you need to show them later. External stakeholders like alumni, employers, industry advisors. You know that you have to have the industry panels, advisors meeting at least once a year, kan? Right? Why do you think you need that? because the standard says so. Standard kata kena ada satu, jadi kita pun buat satu. What is more important in here? It is more of the contribution from the industry into the curriculum. That is the more important thing rather than it must be done once a year. And it can be your strength if your industry actually contributes significantly. Like you could see industries are interested to participate in those activities. That means you have a good rapport with the industry, and that is actually supporting your study here. That means the students are actually getting something that is actually good from the industry through their participation. So that meeting is not really what we are looking for. It is more of the involvement of the stakeholders. But that's just one of the pin counting, the minimum pin counting that the board is doing. One meeting. But you may have one meeting, but there is no, you look at the meeting minutes, there's no interaction at all, but you have a meeting. Well, you pass the pin counting, but you do not get the actual intention of that process. That's what it is. The visiting facilities. Now, one of the things that we visit the facilities, what do you think is it for? It must be highly advanced, many machines. What do you think the evaluators will be looking for? Safety. Yes, that probably safety as overall. Anything else when they visit your facilities? Functioning, that means your equipments are actually functioning. Yes? Human factors, you would expect there will be people responsible in managing those facilities, maintenance of it. Do you think calibration is needed in these facilities? Tapi standard saya cakap kan, dalam engineering technician standard saya cakap, we never mention anything about calibration. But if you do calibration, that is your wow factor really. Yeah, you do above than what is expected of you, right? Because in teaching, probably if you tell them you need to calibrate, but this is the process and so on, that's probably good enough, right? But if you go right down to calibration, which not all institutions are having that liberty and budget, right, to do all those things, that's a wow factor for you. So it is above than what the standard is asking you to do. So you see how you can leverage on beyond what the standard wants, better than what the standard wants, because the standard is all about minimum standard. Okay, so visiting the facilities, they will be looking at whether the equipment is functioning and whether the person actually is able to operate the machine. Sometimes. And sometimes, not all the time. Kalau dia pergi all the time, tak siap nak kerja dia. Sometimes you show this CNC machine. So then you think, who's actually operating this? Somebody said, okay, can you show me how is it being done? Right. That if the person doesn't know, then he's only for sure, and maybe the equipment is also not being used. And they triangulate. When they are talking to the students, they say, any one of you had any experience working with the CNC machine? Silence. So tadi operator tak ada, yang tahu, student sekarang silent. Betul dia pergi kat lecturer pula kan? Who teaches this course where they need to use CNC machine? Adalah tangan soal. Right? Betul dia pun tanya. Okay. can you show me what actually is being done in this program? Oh, dia bertunjuk ada semua kan. Okay, finally, can you show me any piece of work done by the students? Oh, tak ada lagi. We plan for next semester. Right? That means tak ada lah kan. We plan. So sometimes we use the word, yeah, we plan to do it, tapi the plan is in the head. It's not a plan when it's in the head. Right? If you plan, it's documented. It's a proof. Right? That's what a plan is. Right? And you know who's going to do it. So these are the things that when we triangulate, that's how it will be done. And itu dia kata checking relevant document. This is at the end of the day, show me. Dengar tak, the 5 wives and 1 husband. Biasa kan? Orang Islam dia ada 4 wives ya, tapi ni 5 wives. So, and the evaluators, some evaluators probably maybe asking the wrong questions. For example, they're not supposed to be asking you direct questions. For example, direct question ni, have you done it? Your answer is yes or no, isn't it? What can you gain from that? That's why they will always say, how did you do it? Can you say yes? Tak boleh kan? So you have to explain. So that's the expectation in the process when they are actually triangulating and ascertaining whether the issue that they actually identify are actually resolved. Yeah? So if you know their thinking and you can plan ahead, right? And I have to say, it is always, the demonstration is always in the assessment results, right? Okay, the opening meeting, usually they will introduce, this is one thing, this meeting, right, is actually the meeting of, the responsibility lies with ETAC, not the university. Accreditation is being led by ETAC, not by the university. So that's why the opening meeting, the chair is coming from ETAC, not from the university, not even your vice chancellor, right? Tapi as respect your vice chancellor tu, bolehlah kita letak dekat depan sebelah-sebelah, dia appear kan? So, but the chair is actually ETAC. So remember, in any occasion when it comes to accreditation, it is the responsibility of the accrediting body, right? In fact, dia boleh juga kata, I mean, kalau dia nak kata, you cannot speak, macam tu lah. But it will not be done that way. But that's how a meeting can be controlled. But nevertheless, we always tell them, play by the ear. Sometimes things are not in real control in that sense. So sometimes the vice chancellor didn't realize that he's not chairing, so they start chairing pula. So kita pun kata, play by the ear, right? Okay, and then this, they have to mention what are the objectives. It's not fault finding, because some evaluators can be too nitpicking sometimes. You could see, if that's the case, please report to ETAC. And usually the director or someone representing ETAC, if there's only one program, probably just the head of panel. If the head of panel is having that problem, then it's a bit difficult. So you can actually, there will be a form later on that you can fill out, or you can call directly the director or secretariat at the office. Alright, so it's not fault finding, and they will explain the method, and the method is so easy. What are the typical methods that we have seen before? They will come and interview. Interview will be one of the methods. Next, they will observe. They observe things that are happening. And the third is they look at documents. Those are the 3 methods that they will actually do. They will not go further away than those 3 methods. So that's basically what they will be doing. But observation, sometimes things are not right on that day. Say, for example, you have already planned. You plan the visit to the laboratory. There was one occasion, everything was very nice. Suddenly, one of the guides from the university said, well, in order for us to go to that building, we have a shortcut. Dia cakap semua ada shortcut. Padahal dalam rehearsal tu long cut. Tapi dia bagi shortcut. Sebab dia tengok panel ni dah letih. Let's go for a shortcut. As soon as he opened the doors to the shortcut, there were a lot of piles of materials, steel, rods, concrete, just in front of the door. Was not meant to be the pathway, but now we observe. Kan? So bila they observe, what do you think they will do? They will start to say, is it an isolated case? They will want to know more. Macam itulah. That's how an observation can lead to deeper probing in some of the areas. Kalau dia kata, okay, dia tengok 1 or 2 fire extinguisher, okay, dia takkan tengok semua kan. Tapi kalau dia jumpa the first one, padahal semua orang tahu dah expired about 3 years. So what does it tell you? Oh, pandai kan ada satu universiti tu Betul Zara? Dia kata, oh, that fire extinguisher is meant for teaching. So teaching doesn't need any expiry date. So dia kata, okay lah. Mana universiti kalau kata, ya lah, universiti kamu bisa bijak semua kan? Ada jawapannya. Alright. And then they will actually review their plans and their schedule as they go along. But they will agree, they will try to get an agreement with you if they want to change the schedule. And they will confirm the closing time and hopefully, usually, sometimes they bring it forward, sometimes it will be a bit delayed depending on the situation. If it is much advanced, some people say it's a good sign. But it could be they have nothing to say, nothing good to say, or nothing good to search. But usually, most of the time when we have an early closing is always better news. But usually the evaluators will try to brief the head of the department or the group responsible before the final exit meeting. Alright, let's I've talked a bit just now about the triangulation and so on. I think I will skip this one, right? Because I've mentioned to you how they actually triangulate things. But these are just some of the areas that they do to try to triangulate. For example, about your program outcomes, whether they were a planned assessment, ataupun it was already planned but not executed. Evidence is basically proof, and most of the proof could be found in your document. So keep your document as a proof. Mentioned about the ways that they do things: observation, interviewing, as well as documents. Exit meeting. Okay, just be remember, exit meeting is going to be very short because everything, you see, there shouldn't be any surprises, right? Exit meeting shouldn't give you any surprises. Any surprises should be during the process, right? You already know where your problems are. The exit meeting is only trying to address what were the issues identified, and it's going to be 5 minutes at most, or maybe 10 minutes. But some people get carried away with 20 minutes trying to explain things. But no, it's supposed to be an exit, and that's the end of it. No more discussion. It is not a place where we are going to have a discourse. It's exit, it says. So we only mention what were the findings, and you have a chance to respond to these findings when the final report or the first draft is actually being produced. You can look at them, and then you can rebut if there were factual inaccuracies. The problem with universities, they use the word rebuttal. It's also the wrong word used by I don't know who started this rebuttal. It was not meant to be a rebuttal. It was only meant to check for factual inaccuracies. Later on, it became, the word rebuttal came. So everybody wants to rebut the report. Rebutting the report, sometimes you say, oh, it shouldn't be written that way, it should be written this way. You're telling the evaluators, please write this way, not the way that you've written. That's not what we're asking. We're asking, are there any factual inaccuracies in the report? If there are, tell us. Then we will correct the report. Not to tell us how to write the report. In what manner, whether is it going to be toning down or something like that. It's not that. It's only factual inaccuracies. But later on, there's not much practice actually, but it's a good practice for your side, is can we also identify what will be the corrective action? If you accept that's the report and that report is accurate, or accurate after the factual inaccuracy has been given, what would be your response to it? What would be your corrective action? That would be what we would like to see. In fact, it helps a lot if you are clear on your corrective actions that you're going to take against those issues raised in the report. But what we see, for example, of late, issues of maintenance and safety came into the picture. And during the council meeting, when we asked the university to respond on whatever has been presented, then the university said, okay, we had actually addressed that safety issue A, safety issue B, and so on. But the report was still correct on that day, right? Because that was the findings. But what happens is, during the during the decision meeting, the council may be a bit more relaxed in delivering the decision. Say, oh yeah, they have closed, but of course we still need to see. So we will not defer the accreditation. So you have that advantage. And if it is nothing to do with safety, then probably they say, okay, your outcome based, it's not really much of a question here because you know exactly what you're doing and you're close to doing it. So they may say, okay, maybe we'll give you full 6 years, but in the interim we'll come and see. You know, that will be the situation. And that's what we like to see, actually. University to know where are the problems and how to address the problem. But don't ask ETAC to solve your problem. ETAC is there to tell what is your problem, but not to solve your problem. Solving your problem is your responsibility. Right? That's what it is. So jangan kata, tell us how to do it and we will do it. EAC will never tell you how to do it, right? But you have to. That's why sometimes some overzealous evaluators do give you solutions. And then suddenly you did that solution, the next evaluators come, that's not what I meant, or that is not what it should have been. You marah pada evaluators ya. Dulu kata boleh, macam tu, tak boleh pula. Kerana standard dah berubah. So these are the things. That's why, remember, we are not giving solutions, but identifying issues, grading those issues. But you have to solve your problem, right? That's what it is. Even in you are certified to ISO 9001, yeah? Right? And that's what it is, right? The evaluators, the auditors are not supposed to give you solutions as well. But they may say, oh, maybe I can share you with some of the best practices happening somewhere else. You may adopt them, you may not adopt them. Those are just best practices. But you still have to solve your own problem. Yeah? Okay. As much as I said just now, there was a lot related to your own preparation. So there may be something overlapping what I'm trying to say here. But I'm giving you in a nutshell here what are the preparations that you need to do? Of course, your curriculum is designed for outcome based, correct? Right? If it is not, we will not be coming in. Right? MQA pun expect dulu betul, awal-awal tu tak perlu pun kan. Design itu later on came in, ya. And this will have PEO, POs and COs. What do you think this PEO is supposed to be? How important are they? Dia kata ada PO, kita buat PO. Dia kata ada PO, kita buat PO. Apa pentingnya? What's so important about the PO, PO as well as the CO? Why do you want this PO really? Actually, PO is very important. I'm not a good lecturer. I ask question and I answer myself. I should be drawing the answers from all of you. Lecture room style is a bit difficult. Tapi I can just say, you with a yellow shirt, I'm sure you'll not like it. Everybody starts to hide. Okay, PEO. The PEO actually tells you where your graduates are going to work. Correct? Where they are going. And you prepare your PO based on where they are going. And where they are going, let's say you say that one of the things I want them to go to become entrepreneur. Let's say, right? Semua you mesti nak buat entrepreneur, kan? Right. Okay, where is the knowledge base in your curriculum that leads you to being an entrepreneur? Where are the skill base that leads you to the entrepreneur in the curriculum? But Malaysia is good at solving its own problem by creating a course. We have problem with racial, let's have a racial harmony course. You have problem with not many people getting jobs, let's have an entrepreneur course. Not good, ataupun okay, this university yang fokus apa? What's the focus of the university? Niche dia lah, electronics, right? So everybody must take electronics, kan? So there will be a course on electronics. Doesn't matter whether you are agriculture ke you are business, kena buat. Is that the case? Because that is your niche. Macam katakan UPM lah, UPM is agriculture based daripada dulu, kan? Jadi semua program yang ada tu mesti ada satu kursus agriculture. And then that has been how we design our curriculum and how we do things. It has not changed much. Yet we introduced PEO, and yes, no meaning. But it is meant to be providing you with a scope of what you are going to give to your students. That's what your PEO is. You want them to be entrepreneurs, but you're not focusing them to become entrepreneurs. Everything is all going to a different direction. And then you wanted to produce leaders, that's it. But in your course, it doesn't lead to someone becoming a leader because you don't address that. It doesn't have to be a course, it can be embedded and so on. But that's what your PEO is telling you. Therefore, the curriculum content must have them, whether it is in the form of knowledge, skills, or attitude. That's what makes your PEO relevant. And because they have that knowledge, skills, and attitude, they can go into all these areas. They are prepared to go there. Tapi kita tanya, is the PEO relevant? Tanya balik, ya. Kita tanya orang student balik, kan? Kita tanya orang industri. Padahal kita yang nak tu, kan? Betul tak? Lepas tu kita tanya orang, betul ke? We want it. And our curriculum, then tak keluar apa yang kita nak. Yet kita buat CQI, but we never look at, is it really aligned with your PO and the rest? That's what I'm trying to say here. Many of us pay lip service to all this, but actually it has a lot of meanings there. From your BAO, you know the scope. That means the knowledge-based, the skill-based, and the attitude-based domain. How much that you want to put in. That's what it is. Then, of course, many of us will just do the mapping, because with the mapping it's easy to say, oh, we have already demonstrated by mapping, right? Model, there are many models. ETAC or EAC never tells you what models you have to choose. You develop your own models, comprehensive models. You want, in the UK, I've been saying this a lot. In the UK, they are only concerned with your final years. Mostly, maybe a bit of your penultimate year, the third year. So all the marks accumulated are actually coming from your third year and the fourth year. Mostly from the fourth year and predominantly from your final year projects. Because the final year projects is more like, they say, partial fulfillment for award of a degree. You fail your project, you fail everything, something like that, without fulfilling that. So that's how serious, how they look at things differently. That's their model. And they know why they want it, because all the outcomes were actually attainable towards the end. So how do we look at it? In our case, comprehensive, some say dominant and so on, right? It's okay, whatever system that you have, follow it, right? No one can say that you are wrong. It's just that one could be better than the other, that's all. But you can never be wrong in this case. But if you have no confidence, then you think that you're wrong. But the panel, sometimes the panels may also have excess baggage. I use the word excess baggage because their own experience tells them that it should be this way. And they dictate you to have that way. No, that's not the way. Right? They can listen to you. They may have their own way, but they're not supposed to give you solutions. That's what it is. And that's the reason why we say they're not supposed to give you solutions. Right? But they can discuss with you. Maybe they have a better practice. They want to share their best practice, fine, but it is not going to have any impact on accreditation. Right? So specification and delivery, is it conventional? No, outcome-based cannot be conventional. It's a paradigm shift, right? So where is your K, S, and A? Where is your knowledge? Where is your skills? Where are you effective? Or if you say it's all knowledge, then you are back to the good old days of conventional system, right? And then you start looking at the learning styles. You have to understand your students, right? How they learn. Do you know why? I may be, I don't know, maybe some people say I'm biased. Maybe I'm biased. Why is it that women are performing better than men during these days? Not during my days. No, Linda was not happy. She is probably a bit later than my days. But during our days, my days, you find that performance were better with the male students compared to female. Generally. But now, females are much better than the male. But if you look at the psychology of it, right, actually, even though we are equal, we complement each other, but we have different ways of the extras that we may have. Do you know that women are very abstract? Abstract kan? Betul tak? Kalau husband dia balik, bau wangi ya, there must be something. Right? Then you must have been somewhere else. The smell is not come to you just like that. So they start to explore. That's being abstract. An abstract person will understand concept faster. Because concepts are all abstract. So they can learn abstract. That's why in class you give, we always lamented why our students cannot understand this concept. because they are not abstract enough to understand it quickly. But women understand concept faster. Men, dia lain pula men ni, kalau tengok cerita Piramli, mari kawan-kawan, you ask them to do a certain thing, they don't think straight away, do it, and then maybe spoil something and learn out of that from the mistakes that they make. So there are different ways that they learn. So if you understand their learning styles, how they accept things, learning will be much better. That's why as an academy we should try to understand our students. That's part and parcel of actually outcomes that we want. It's more than that. I'm just saying that, for example, I could be a person who wants to see everything first before I understand. That's a global perspective. But I could also be sequential, one by one. You tell me a bit first before I move to the next stage. So people are different, how they learn. But we are supposed to be the teachers, right? But we do not know how people learn. Sebab tu most of the teachers dia pergi belajar pedagogi dulu kan. Kita tak, that's why when I first joined the university in those days, they say lecturers are the most untrained professionals. When were you trained? You were trained because your professors were like that, you became like him. If it's good, you'll be good. If it's bad, you are equally bad or worse. Yeah? But that's it's not conventional, so we are moving away. We're going to the outcomes approach, very much assessment, PO assessment. Everything is all about assessment, right? And at the end of the day, assessment rubrics becomes important, and the subjectivity is being eliminated by having a rubrics. Constructive alignment is something that you need to do to make sure that everything is as planned. And that's all about outcome curriculum as well as assessment. And that's what is your domain as an academic, and that's what evaluation is going to be all about on that day. Of course, they're not going to touch about everything, so they pick one issue, and if they are satisfied, probably they're not going to probe further. Yeah? But don't forget about the CQI, stakeholders involvement, academics involvement in the CQI. So as far as accreditation is concerned, we look at the CQI, we look at your outcomes, and based on the criteria, which is the academic curriculum. Yeah? So the criterion important here is about academic curriculum. That's why I showed you just now the breadth and depth. If the curriculum is not there, you can forget about the rest. And then the other criterion is about outcome based, so it must be outcome based. The next one you have to ensure is your assessment and evaluation. That's the output that we look from there, which is the evidence. And I'm sure you have been operating based on PDCA, plan, do, check, and act. Right? That's what quality cycle is all about, even in teaching. So knowledge and attitude profiles that you provide from the curriculum will make sure that you have that broadly defined or well defined. Yeah? So breadth and depth of the program is all about. So this is a paradigm shift that we talk about, right? It's not conventional. Conventional focus mostly on knowledge. Whether they understand, they don't understand, set the examination, they pass, they get it. They don't pass, too bad. Right? Okay? That's what the Dublin and Sydney robustness and the standard that they are looking around this. Right? So for your preparation, okay, we are in good time. So for your preparation, ETAC, as I said, is chairing, but attendees, you determine who are your attendees for the opening and the closing, right? Then there will be breakout rooms that you have to prepare. Imagine you have 5 programs. It's possible that the panel may say, I want to interview maybe alumni and stakeholder and industry player separately. Is there room for that? So this is where your resource has got to be good enough to identify in advance, right? If the panels plan to do that, you will need to know that, or you must have some standby, right? Including private sessions. When you say private, don't go in. Tapi kadang-kadang you boleh knock lah kan. Tanyalah. Jangan sampai tak boleh masuk langsung. Ada satu case tu kan, dia tak masuk langsung, jadi dia biar je panel tu. Lepas tu panel tu, kenapa tak tanya? Dia kata private, sampai tak boleh tanya langsung. No, it's not like that. When you say private sessions, of course, if we ask you to come in, you can come in. But if we don't ask you to come in, you can still knock and ask. If you want to ask certain questions, you can always do that. Don't worry. Sitting arrangement, this is important. Sometimes we arrange like this sitting arrangement. Do you think it's good for accreditation, this sitting arrangement? I'm dominant at the front. Stage on stage, they say. Everybody is subservient. So it's not a good way because you're not at the same level. Right? Or maybe the students are all sitting at the back and I'm standing in front here asking questions. So that is not a good way of arranging the system setting. So find a suitable setting whereby it becomes comfortable for us to communicate. Near enough, right, for that communication to take place, and it becomes more casual than so serious in the kind of discussion that you're going to get. Name tag and signages, I think you are practicing it. That means to say you are very much systematic in the way that you look at things. It may help you in many cases there. Short presentation, preferably 5 minutes only. As I said, just tell about your strengths because everything else is in the report. Right? There was one particular university that says, we have nothing to say here. They were given that 5 minutes to 10 minutes. We have nothing to say here because everything that we wanted to say is in the report. If the report is good, apa lah kan? Alright? But anyway, it happens. Right? Some are so confident, they say, after all, that presentation is not meant to present the report. It's supposed to present any add-ons. Because your report could have been in for the last 6 months, right? So there could have been something new to add on. So that's where the presentation allows. And then you could use that to highlight your strength. But the presentation should also highlight the concern that was raised before, just to make sure that you tell them it's close and why they are close. But details are in the report. You could say that. Okay, and it is good, especially with the Sydney and Dublin Accord visit, prepare a short write-up of about a page. Because the reviewer will have to prepare that, trying to understand what is it all about this university and the programs. And they need to know what's the student population of the university, how many engineering students. So I think this is where, what is your unit called just now? Strategy and quality management. So it's good if you can prepare a short write-up about the university and the programs, the number of students and so on. Maybe percentage and the gender distribution. That is good enough as a short write-up about university and faculty. Because very unlikely you're going to get it in your SAR. Usually. You may not put in there, but if you do put in there, so much the better because you don't have to prepare this short write-up. And then it's good if you have the annual report of the faculty. It helps to say, well, this is what we have been doing. If you have something good to share. And prepare to answer on institutional support, as I mentioned just now, especially at the opening meeting. What's the institutional support that has been given to the program? Mostly budget-wise and other resources, right? Even faculty retention. Leadership is also something that they are looking for, which means to say, we had one situation in Pakistan when I was mentoring in Pakistan, there was one department that has just changed the head of department and they went for accreditation. And that new head department knows nothing. But luckily there was the old head department around to help. Right? Otherwise, it would be seen as there is no leadership. Right? And it can happen. But luckily the old head department said, okay, I'll be still around to support. Fine. Right? So remember, leadership is important here, and because they wanted to see that there is leadership, academic leadership at the university. Safety. There were cases when our panel says safety culture is not in place. I don't like that word actually when we say safety culture. Safety culture. Culture, can you change culture overnight? Can you change culture in 1 year, 2 years? What is a culture is difficult to change. And if they write it as a safety culture in there, you are actually in a hot soup. You cannot change a culture. Can you change a culture in 1 year, 2 years? Very unlikely. And culture takes time. But if they say safety practices are breached, then probably practices can be corrected, isn't it? If you breach the practices. So sometimes panels may go overboard, but they may be serious about it. But then when they write such a things, you may have difficulty in doing the corrective action. So sometimes we ask them, please tone down, maybe don't write it as safety culture, but rather it's more of a safety practices. Lapses in the safety practices. If it is widespread, still you can correct that. But culture is... There was one situation, and evaluators say safety practice is not in place in the... No, they say the laboratory is not safe. What does it mean? The laboratory is not safe. Can you go into a facility that is not safe? So it must be sealed, isn't it? So can you imagine your laboratory has to be sealed? Where are your students going to work? So that happened, and the council made a decision to decline. In those days, it didn't refer to decline. Decline accreditation. It was to one of the top university in Malaysia, Mr. Finally, because of that statement, that the laboratories were sealed, they cannot go in. Immediately, the university got 10 million to improve their laboratories. Tapi it's a hard thing, isn't it? To experience such a thing. But, well, that's why I say there is that financial benefit that you may get. But of course, it's the hard way. We don't want it to go through that way. But the way that the panel writes has a strong bearing in the decision of the council. That's why we always want to have the moderation to take place, and council take it as the evaluators are their eyes, and the ears and the eyes of the council. So it's difficult to say otherwise. And that's the very reason that you need to not just say yes to everything. There must be some discussion, right? For example, about issue of safety. If you yourself do not understand it, then possibly they get their way. So it is important that you understand what is it all about. Then it's easy for you to have a discussion. Liaison person is important. You need people to keep track on what's happening and understand. You know why I say liaison is important is, you see quite a number of things happening, different people are looking at it. But how are you going to coordinate and understand what happens on that day? You're not going to have a video capture of it, because you're not allowed to have a video capture of it. So who captures all these? I mean, it may be in the report, but you cannot really see about everything, isn't it? Because what the report will not capture any oral conversation. So if your liaison person does not capture all this oral conversation will be lost. And the next time they come, it will be written. Right? So liaison person is not just to laze around, but also to note down what's happening. And share that, or get somebody, that information from somebody to make sure that they laze with you. Comprehensive SAR is definitely important, so make sure that you really address the requirements as prescribed in the standards. What are the issues that you need to highlight? Comprehensive. But most of the time, the word is self-assessment. It is not describing. It's assessing. So when you describe something, you are assessing against what standard? What benchmark? What comparison? If you think along that way, your self-assessment report is going to be really an assessment report, not just an annual descriptive report. It's an assessing report. You have 20 staff. You say, we have 20 staff. Stop. Is that an assessment? What do you assess with that 20 staff? Are you assessing to say whether they have the right qualification, they have the right competencies in different sub-disciplines? You know, that's assessment. Against what? The minimum 8 required by the standards? Or minimum 6 required for DUBLIN Accord? You know, that's an assessment. But if you say, I have 20 staff, so what? Now from there, you can bring out the wow factors. If you are able to assess yourself properly. Right? So it can be against your peers or your benchmark universities normally higher than you. So that's what assessment is all about. And also against the standards. Right, next. The accreditation team, well, they have to be well versed with your curriculum. That means to say, when I say the team here is the university team, you have to understand your curriculum. If you don't understand your curriculum, everything will go haywire on that day. Right? That's why head departments is important as well. Documents check for mistakes. Now we are human. We make mistakes, but sometimes we never want to claim that we do make mistakes. And I always say, you know, give your 3 best, medium, and bottom, let's say, performance. So all those performance, your max, your median, and then your bottom. But what some people send, yes, true, all the 3 of them, but they never double check and say, were the marks added up correctly? Not yet about the marking is correct or not, but the addition of the marks. As simple as that. And there were many cases, actually, many cases, the marks were not added correctly. What does it tell about a university? Imagine, you are not giving, I mean, this were found out by reviewers, by evaluators, and so on. So the impression is, you are not marking, you are not really being fair to your students. And you say, oh no, it'll never happen to us. We are excellent university, we are good at it. No, there was one professor from Imperial College, he was an external examiner to our civil engineering department in those days. He told us that. He said, it cannot be. Then he said, well, I can prove to you. Give me 2 batches of the mark script. And the next day he came back and said, see these 3 and another 5 from the other pile. They were not added up correctly. And that's why they had to implement in the UK double marking. Because it is widespread, really. But everybody say, no, we never make mistakes. Okay, so think about that. When you prepare your document, make sure they are all correct and accurate. Document are laid out with labels, but now you have all your online versions. As I said just now, make sure that it is easy to navigate. Right? Don't tell them, okay, we have 300 documents, navigate yourself. Imagine, eh? Students' motivation. Okay, sometimes university give a piece of paper to show that their students are motivated, because those are questions and answer that typically an evaluator will be asking. So if you answer that way, it sounds positive, then you must be motivated, right? And of course, you always, students, if you ask them, are there any questions, are there any improvement, they say, no, everything is all great. It's all scripted, right? Jadi kita pun rasa, betul, ni student is more happy je. Right? I mean, it's not natural, right? Students happy in everything. But of course, they will not be happy in one thing. What is it? Wi-Fi connectivity. So we don't expect a panel to listen to them all the time with Wi-Fi. We should be asking when do they use their Wi-Fi in their classes, really? And it is not about are they happy with the Wi-Fi connection. When do they use it? How was it? Right? Were there any interruptions? How did you manage to overcome all those? I mean, those will be the sort of questions that we'll be asking, really. And we want to know. It's not about just connectivity. Okay? And motivation. You see, one of the things that we see about motivation, right? For example, if you ask this question, how do you feel now? You're already in the final year. What's your feeling about graduating soon? Or if it's all about, it's all bleak, there's no job and so on, they are not motivated, right? Even before graduating, they are already down. Why? Is it because of the economic climate? Or is it because the academic staff were not motivated themselves? Or is it the university is not motivating them? What is it? And so this is what we wanted to know, really, when we talk about motivation of students. If they don't feel that they are going out and able to contribute, they are not motivated, really. And there's something that is holding them up. That must be from that teaching and learning process that they have gone through. So we need to somehow triangulate that. But if they are motivated, probably we don't have to go further, isn't it? Alright, so student motivation is like that. IEP presence is very important because internationally all IEPs everywhere in the world, right, they will be present, but suddenly IEP in Perlis, they say, we are far away, we cannot be present. Nowadays, presence can be virtual as well. So make your effort to get them virtually if they cannot come face to face. Right? Put all effort. And then, of course, when they come, hopefully they're not going to say, this is the first time I've been invited. Imagine 3 years you've run the program and this is the second cycle after 6 years and so on, and they say this is the first time. When was, usually evaluators will ask, when was the last time you came to this faculty? Oh, this is the first time. When were you appointed? 3 years ago. Ada yang bagus lagi tu, we went last time, this was some long time ago. They say they have never invited us except on the accreditation day. They are very frank. But they thought, what's the consequence of saying those things? And just invited. Untuk equipment yang kita tengok dekat institution tu, semua tu JKR. So dia pinjam daripada JKR, dia tak ada equipment. Just like some universities tu, there was one in India. This is a true story really. In India where the library was gone within a split second, you can say, because when the evaluators visited the library, it was a nice library, I mean modest library, and then everything all well described, people running it was there. Then they left, and one of the evaluators forgot the specs. Said, I'm going back to that place to get my specs. The guy said, no, I still want to go back and pick up myself. It's my fault. So he went, and there's no library. It's an empty space. So sometimes accreditation, I mean, you do kind get that kind of weird stories. Eh? All right. External examiners and IAP involvement, I think these are important, but more importantly is how do they get involved and the sort of value that they put in. It's not about being counting, having one report or two reports in 5 years or 6 years, that kind of thing. Right? Those are just the bean counting. But more importantly is whether they are giving you the right input. Okay. Final year project and the IDP projects. Of course, for the Dublin Accord, most of you will be looking at either final project or a design project, right? Either one. Or you can have both. There's no problem with that. And for this, because this is going to be your showcase. That's the ultimate at the final before a person goes out, right? So it is important, right? It is important that it's not yet 12. Okay. They are going to chase me out before 1. Okay. The final year project is going to tell about, the quality of your students. That's the ultimate. If they are good there, if anything has failed, that is going to help you. Otherwise, if everything fails, that's a fail, there's nothing to help you really. So that's why focus on your final design project, because most of the evaluators, when they come, they will pick the first thing, your report, your final project or your design project. It gives you that quality, tells you the quality of your students from the quality of your report, right? Their report basically. Yeah? So make sure that you have that top, middle, and bottom, and the list. Some people say, if you get all A's, of course, evaluators will say, why all A's? But that doesn't mean that you cannot get all A's. As long as you have the right approach and you have the evidence. Because that is at the end, isn't it? But it looks strange with all A's. If your student's performance is not really that good, suddenly everything is all good. Man. So you must commensurate. But nevertheless, I don't see any problem if you have many A's and many B's as far as final year projects are concerned. But that is the capping. CQI, it must be there, right? So if a lecturer is being asked, what sort of improvement? Or you say our system say we don't have to improve because we attain the KPI. Then they say, how many times have you attained the KPIs? Say, for the past 10 years I've attained the KPI. And the KPI has not changed? No. I'm happy with that and everybody is happy, so why change? So improvement is not about maintaining what you are satisfied with for past years. So CQI here means, well, let's put it at a high level. Right? See whether your KPI can be attained, which means you are pushing your students, you are challenging them more. You see, a first-class student coming from an A university or first-class student coming from a B university, they may not be equal. even though both of them got first class, isn't it? The one is more challenged than the other. But both got first class by virtue of the situation that happens within each universities. So within a university, you have to challenge the students. And that's why very unlikely that all the courses everybody will be getting in unless you don't challenge them. Right? Okay? Academic stuff, you must be good at outcome-based constructive alignment. You're good at this, you get away during accreditation. That's all you need to be able to do, right? Apart from your other duties, of course. Technical stuff, make sure that you understand your equipment, you know how to operate them, and making sure that maintenance and safety are taken into consideration is done, right? The time management, of course, it is important, but very much on the evaluator side. But on your side, you have also, for example, you know that the visit time to the laboratories is about maybe 1.5 hours, right? Don't stretch too much. So, you know, sometimes evaluators may spend too long. You can usher them out, say, we have a few more to go. That's how you manage your time. No gift policy, please. Jangan bagi harum manis, jangan bagi musangking. Walaupun dia kata, kerajaan kata fruits okay kan. But when it comes to accreditation, please, no gifts policy. Sekarang nak bagi tak apalah. Semasa akreditasi jangan bagi. Right? Sometimes, tapi there are universities. That's why I'm really not that hard on this when it comes to. I've seen some practices overseas pun. Dia kadang-kadang dia letak je maybe university mark. It doesn't cost much, university mark. Dia nak promote university dia letakkan meja tu dalam kotak. So if the panel takes it, they take it lah. If they don't take, they don't take it. Maybe they're supposed to pour water into that mark kan, tapi dia ambil terus. That's your choice. Ataupun bawa point pen ada nama universiti kan. So dia terbawa balik, okay lah tu kan. But you don't give them as a gift atau ambil gambar lagi kan. Right? So there's a no gift policy here. And then transport and accommodation, I think this has got to be well, I think synchronized transportation, because we would expect our panels to be on time, and there were cases we even left one of panel members because he was late. Dia kena cari taxi lah lepas tu pergi. Because we have been serious about that. We say 8 o'clock, before 8 they must be there. The bus will move in. So the same thing we would expect from the university to make sure that this will also be under control. Accommodation, reasonable accommodation is expected of. Tapi kalau nak bagi 6 star bagilah, tak apa. Kalau ada 6 star, 7 stars ke kan. So Perlis ni the best apa 4 star lah. 4.5 star lah kok. Okay, but reasonable lah kita. Dan tak nanti bila panel duduk dalam tu moldy and so on, dia ada bad mood pula lepas tu kan. Dia macam ada satu case tu, panel makan pedas hari tu kan. Habis, hilang mood dia hari tu kan. So every time dia cakap dengan orang, marah je. Rupanya dia pedas. Sebab dia nak marah kan. Then support faculty, I think the faculty will have to support everything. Tapi there was one good practice dekat Polytechnic that we've been recently. You see, accreditation happens to all programs. What happens is that when it comes to engineering accreditation, the business, the accountancy and so on actually provide the support. And when accreditation happens at accountancy, the engineering people support over there. I haven't seen that before, but that was the first time I see at Polytechnics. One, not all Polytechnics, but I think 2 Polytechnics we've been to, they practice that. So in a sense, it reduced the burden and the focus could be more intense on important things at the university during accreditation. Yeah? But that's a good practice too. Yeah? So your support faculty in Malaysia, when I talk about support faculty here means it includes those who are not from your department, right? Maybe not from your faculty. They support your faculty, maybe from the science department, mathematics department. We don't quite practice here in Malaysia, but it's actually practiced overseas. The dean of these faculties will be present and they will be asked, how do they provide the support to the programs? But we don't practice at the moment here, but maybe in the future. But this is where overseas that is being practiced. Yeah? All right, developing the curricula. I'm just going to pass this. You are probably competent on all this SEAT. You can get all of my presentation here, whereby this is the latest GAPC 4, comparing between Sydney and Dublin. In this particular Sydney and Dublin, of course, you can compare all the three. But by looking at the three or looking at the two, you can make a judgment where you are, right? Because if you know the higher limit and the lower limit, you can make some form of judgment. But if you look at the word well-defined, what do we mean by well-defined? Without a description between the well and the broad, right? And as well as complex. So I just put it there. And then we go down to knowledge and attitude profile. And this is the reason why they decided to come up with this. Before there wasn't any knowledge and attitude profile. But what they didn't tell you here is this attitude and knowledge profile has no quantification. It doesn't tell you how much of each of the knowledge, right? Although you may have, you may have 9 knowledge profile now, from 8 they come to 9, but they don't tell you how much. Why they didn't tell you how much? Because your PEO dictates that. The scope of your PEO, what you want your students to be, will dictate on how much the knowledge that you're going to provide. But they say you must have all the 9. So how significant is it? And that's the reason why when you see at your PEO, maybe 3 or 4 PEOs, which are the dominant PEO really, isn't it? Then that's possibly the dominancy in the knowledge and attitude profile will be there as well. But you cannot say, I need the PEO, but I don't have the knowledge profile. Right? So I'm just going to look at this a bit. For example, it says, the graduate engineering technician Dublin Accord is about well-defined. So what it does, 2 to 3 years, the program. Right? That's typically what it is. Now, if you look at, again here, technicians here, right? DK1, descriptive, formula-based, understanding of the natural science. Descriptive, formula-based. But if you understand what the Sydney is, it says a systematic, theory-based. And if you go to Washington, it says a systematic, theory-based as well, isn't it? So there is a lot of common between Sydney and Dublin when it comes to that knowledge. But look at Sydney here, applicable to the sub-discipline. So engineering technology is very much narrow based on the sub-discipline. Although many produces, for example, civil engineering technology, that's wide based. But if you say water resources engineering technology. That's a sub-discipline base. And that's what most of the engineering technology is all about, narrowing down into specialization. But that doesn't mean that you cannot widen, right? Because depending on the country, some countries may require some may not, because depending on the kind of work that is available as well. And if you want to move laterally, you might want to go for a more generic ones. Okay, so that's your choice. No one can say you're wrong, because you may have done this proper study anyway. So that is how you see that differentiation. So if you see the three, you could then identify where you are. Right? You're not going to be going above than that. If you want, there's no problem, but you might want to keep to your area. Okay? Now, that was just the knowledge profile number one. But let's go to another example. This is a very short one. It says procedural mathematics. You know that everybody coming with a very poor mathematics grade and so on. But the expectation is only that they do procedural mathematics, numerical maths, all procedural, right? It's more like, everything is all laid out, you plug in, kind of mathematics. Yeah. And that's the kind of mathematics level expected from that. But that doesn't mean that you cannot go higher if you think that your students can do better, right? But the minimum is procedural mathematics, numerical analysis, statistics. Still statistics, but procedural, right? Applicable in a sub-discipline. So I think if we understand that, it is much easier when we design our curriculum, even now. All right, I'm going to skip all this. You could actually read at your own sweet time, if you do have sweet time. Right? At university, tak ada sweet time, right? Okay, the next one is about problem identification and solving, right? And there are about 7 of them. Here it talks about depth of knowledge required. Okay, so again, if you go to DUBLIN, it says cannot be resolved without extensive practical engineering knowledge. Now, kalau you tak ada practical engineering knowledge dalam your degree, your diploma program, you're going to have a problem, right? Because you cannot resolve without it. So you must have the practical engineering knowledge as reflected in DK 5 and 6. So dia akan bagilah DK 5 tu the knowledge component number 5 and number 6. So which means to say, if you have this DK1, it must be related to DK5 and DK6. Tapi bila pergi dekat course tu, tengok the DK5 and DK6 tak ada. So how do you address this? You do it somewhere else. Whereas here the standard says, if you have a course, that course must address DK5 and DK6, then only you can solve that well-defined problems. That's how you look at it. But not necessarily everything. I'm not talking about this is 100% fit. So there is always a plus and minus here. But if you understand the concept generally, that's the way it is. All right. I think I will skip the rest because there are 7 of them. The first one is the most important one that I mentioned. Without the first one, you're not going to be able to move to the second or the third. Right? Okay. I purposely put everything there. This is about engineering activities. Again, look at here. Involve a limited range of resources. For example, people, data, information, natural, financial, and physical resources, and or appropriate technology. So you compare with the Sydney. What does it say? You still have people, information, action plans, and appropriate, including analytical and or design software. So do you need a design software here? Nak buat boleh, tak nak buat tak apa kan? That's how it is. Right? Okay, I think I'll skip that as well. Usually yang ni kita bagi 5 hari ni khusus Right. Now, look at this one, DA knowledge and attitude profile, which is this is the education profile that we talk about. There are 9 DKs now, so the new standards will have 9 DKs. Used to be 8, right? Even 7. So ethics is the latest one added. And if you look here, SDG comes under 7, and then DK5 is about not only design but also operation, and then we have the social science there. So those are the latest addition into the DKs, and I'm putting it in red so that people are clear as to the changes that happen. That's why ethics is completely new here, taken out from the rest and make it as a knowledge. Actually, it is not really knowledge. That's why they changed the profile to be called knowledge and attitude profiles. Yeah? Of course, there are elements of knowledge in there, but the focus is not so much on the knowledge, but the attitude. Yeah? Okay. Now, again here it says, I'm just looking at the previous one examples that I've given it to you. It says extensive practical engineering knowledge for well-defined problem, DP1. We need these two. Right? For you to be able to solve, to say you have DP1, you need these two. What are they? Engineering design and operation, practical engineering. So if your courses actually focus on these two, you should be able to address DP1. Right? Next, it also says, but this is saying that extensive practical engineering knowledge for well-defined problems supported by DK3 and DK4. So really, this DK3 and DK4 is supporting this. And then this is the anchor of everything. Right? So without this, you are not going to be able to solve well-defined problems. Right? That's the anchor. Right? So let's say, oh, we focus only in ethics, then it becomes bachelor's of ethics. Betul kan? Ataupun social science, bachelor's of social science. But if you really want bachelor's of engineering technology, this is your focus with all those being in place as well. Yeah? Alright? And this is DK3 and DK4 supporting this. Without this, this may not have a good support. Yeah? Alright, so it's a 3-year program, or 2.5. So you have to cap everything, but don't forget about university experience. That's what makes a student better, highly motivated, if they get that university experience. You may not get everything in class. Okay? I'll just put it here. Actually, you can read by yourself. I think this is self-explanatory in terms of the animation that I put. For example, if you have DA1 engineering knowledge, to see the relationship, you can see this is the relationship that happens, where all these DKs are important really, right, based on that DP1 expected of. And this is to solve well-defined problems. Have a look at it. This is all about Sydney Accord. Right? Then I'll just go down to the focus of ETEC. Right? Focus of ETEC here. We are interested in looking at the breadth and depth. Okay? Whether it's complex, broadly defined, or well defined, depending on the levels. But breadth and depth must be there. It can be demonstrated. Next, safety is one thing that we always look at, because engineering is all about safety as well. Okay? but of course not overboard that we forget about the curriculum. Outcome-based engineering education, OBE that we talk about with the PO, they are very important because that is the international standard that shares outcome-based with the rest. They don't share safety, but they share on outcome-based. Right? Next is the quality management system. If you don't have a quality management system in place, we have no confidence of your process. Right? Then improvement should be the agenda of the day. Not only the day, but also for the future. So all in all, you will get weakness of deficiency, which means decline in accreditation if you are not able to meet the breadth and depth. Or safety is compromised altogether. Macam macam safety culture tadi lah kan, it's a total breakdown. So we may even decline accreditation, and if it is not outcome based, we can also decline accreditation. But if it's only lapses here and there, it may not be, because all these can be a concern, including breadth and depth, if it is not a serious thing. Okay, so that is possible 3 points for weakness, which is serious, or everything could be just a condition for conditional accreditation. So in conclusion, still no question. So in conclusion, why conclusion 3? Because this was actually part of a very big PowerPoint, basically my database PowerPoint. I'm just giving you only iceberg, the tip of the iceberg today, because it's only awareness. So straight we go to the conclusion number 3, specific for the IHL. Remember, your SAR is important, self-assessment must be an assessment. Plan the visit well, right? If you don't plan, you plan to fail. The communication, yes, as much as possible, communicate in the language that everybody is comfortable with. Institutional support must be seen given to the programs. Visible leadership should be there, not just a leader but is not visible. Visible means he has that knowledge, he knows what he's doing in leading the department and so on. Academic support, well, remember, if academic staff are not supporting, that means they don't understand the outcome based and so on. That is a recipe for disaster, right? Industry stakeholders support is also important. That could be your wow factor. The breadth and depth of the outcome-based curriculum operationalized, not just planned but operationalized, implemented. Plan is not good enough, but it is implemented. Facilities visit has to be planned properly, making sure that all the safety aspects are taken into consideration. Students and IAP are available for the visit, for the interview to take place. You cannot get them face to face, get them on the virtual mode. Closing the loop must be seen throughout, and QMS should include safety. Because if your quality management system does not really include safety, most likely safety will be left out. They may ask the student, when was the last time in 3 years that you've been here that there was a fire drill? As simple as that. And then let's see, what do we see inside this room? Where is the escape route? Ada. Lampu tu ada kan? Sometimes dia tengok ada escape route tapi lampu tak ada. Okey lah, satu. Tengok dua, sama aja. Semua lampu tak ada. Bila test pun lampu tak keluar. Right. So then that makes them want to probe further. We have a safety officer at the university. We have selalu dekan dia chair untuk safety committee and the faculty. Is it? Tak ada. Usually that's the case, no? Apa deputy dean? Tengoklah macam mana, depending on how your system is. So they will be looking for all those things. Right. And finally on the SDG, everybody sees the 17 SDG. So what's so important about SDG? As I mentioned just now, one of the knowledge profile talks about SDG. Dulu kita SDG ni talk about sustainability and environment. So those has been combined and focus on SDG. Are you going to do all the 17 SDG? But if we understand the classification of this SDG, the first 6 is all about people. Right? The second 6 is all about prosperity. Right? Then the third, the last, the ultimate 3 is about environment. And then you have peace and partnership. So your program contributes toward what? So if we say it's about prosperity, most likely the engineering programs are very much focused on prosperity, isn't it? Because engineering is supposed to create wealth. But at the same time, we should also be overdoing it, overconsumption. Right? So how you train your universities, your students, despite talking about prosperity, you must make sure they understand about life cycle analysis, from cradle to grave, circular economy and all those. Then only they can see how they could contribute within this SDG that we talk about. Yeah? I think I'm giving you just the classification that makes it easier for you to say, yeah, my course is actually contributing to the betterment of the people, whereas, or is creating prosperity to the nation, or is it contributing to the environment, or peace and partnership. Okay, these are the SDG goals that you could actually see. Engineers' role or technicians' role on the SDG. When it comes to people, definitely clean water and sanitation. Right? It's going to create a good environment for them. Right? Sanitation, everything. Right? That's about people, really. So that's why clean water comes under the first group, about betterment of the people. Then goal number 7 is about affordability and clean energy. Prosperity is about industry, innovation and infrastructure. Again, prosperity. Sustainable cities and communities. Again, prosperity. So you need to somehow integrate some of these solutions into your program. And the best way to get this thing done is always by project-based. Right? Project-based is the best learning methods, one would say. You can come up with maybe a theme called Sustainable City, which is already under SDG. Then you start to look at your problem analysis. Your problem solving could be well defined, right? They need to look at the literature, they need to go for lectures, they need to do some group studies, they need to do some tutorials, they need to do some field work, and they may have to experiment on things. Finally, they produce a report. So this is where overall a project-based trains not only providing skills on how to do things, but also provide the necessary knowledge and skills to do those things. Right? And if you repeat them, that becomes their second nature. Anything a problem comes, let's do it by projects. Okay? I think that's about all that I would like to share to you, and you'll find that most of the things that I shared with you are mostly focusing on your core roles. Right? And there's nothing new about it, isn't it? There's nothing new about it. So why are we so fearing the coming of of the ETAC evaluators. There's nothing to fear. And it's supposed to be peer evaluation. What is there to worry? But what it tells us is PDCA, plan, do, check, and act. If you do that, you shouldn't be worrying. You're always ahead, right? Don't wait until the 6th year, right? Do it even in the penultimate year or even earlier or annually, right? That is the best. I think I've covered everything in as much as I would like to share, especially what the evaluators are looking for, what you need to provide, right? And at the end of the day, it's all about having confidence when we leave this place. We are confident that our sons and daughters, we are willing to send them to this institution, to this particular program, because we are satisfied with how things are happening and they are getting the right education. That's the feeling for panels when we leave this place. But if they leave this place and they say, no, I'm not going to send my children here, something is not right. And you're not going to send your students, your sons and daughters as well, isn't it? If you think that it is not right. So that's why, it is good that, we have this understanding. At the end of the day, are you willing to send your son and daughters to this program? Right? And that's what panels are looking for. And of course, you're also looking for that, right? And you're not going to send your sons and daughters here if you think that they're not going to be accredited, right? Or you still keep on sending. Very unlikely, right? Very unlikely. Okay, any questions? Okay, no question, I can always wrap up. Or maybe the wrap up, I will ask our director, he's been silent there, give him something to speak on today. So then, but of course, the communication is not ending here. I think if you do have any problems, issues that you may want to ask, of course, we have all very competent person here, but of course you could also address it to the Zairul as the director of ETAC, of the accreditation department. He could probably give you maybe some insights as to how things are being done, especially when you want your program to be accredited quickly or something like that, right? So I hope yesterday, after talking to your Deputy Vice Chancellor, the Sydney Accord programs, Bachelors of Chemical Engineering Technology, probably would also be due for SA and DA review, together with the Dublin reports on the 5. So you probably will get that news. I'm just giving you the advance news after we had a discussion. Okay, so with that, thank you very much for listening to what I've got to say, and anything good is actually from Allah, and the rest are all my weaknesses. Okay, with that, thank you. Assalamu alaikum and have a good day.
Terima kasih Yang Bersama Bersama. Semoga perkongsian bengkel hari ini akan bermanfaat kepada semua program fakulti serta SPM agar melancarkan perjalanan lawatan penilaian akreditasi bagi program diploma kejuruteraan UniMAP. Majlis seterusnya menjemput yang berusaha Profesor Madya Insinyur Dr. Rizal bin Daud, diiringi oleh Profesor Madya Insinyur Teknologis Dr. Azwan Iskandar bin Azmi untuk menyampaikan cinta hati kepada penceramah. Dipersilakan yang berbahagia Profesor Datuk Ismail Dr. Nurida PT UniMAP. Seterusnya, Yang Berusaha Insinyur Megat Johari bin Megat Muhammad Noor. Dan akhir sekali, dipersilakan Yang Berusaha Insinyur Zairul Amri bin Zakaria. Terima kasih Yang Berusaha Dr. Srizal dan Dr. Azhar Iskandar. Hadirin sekalian, program persediaan lawatan akreditasi kini telah sampai ke penghujung. Terima kasih kepada para hadirin yang sudi meluangkan masa untuk hadir ke bengkel ini. Juga kepada jawatankuasa khususnya SPM yang telah memastikan program ini berlangsung dengan jayanya. Seusai nyanyian lagu semangat UniMAP, yang berbahagia Datuk dan hadirin sekalian dimohon berada di tengah auditorium untuk sesi bergambar, dan seterusnya ke ruang makan ARAS 2 untuk jamuan makan tengah hari. Akhir kalam, hadirin dimohon berdiri untuk nyanyian lagu semangat UniMAP.
Visi Universiti, visi berintegriti, dinamik bangsa berinteraksi. Visi kita semua membina jiwa minda, sama semangat untuk negara. Visi Universiti, visi berintegriti, dinamik bangsa berinteraksi. Visi kita semua membina jiwa minda, sama semangat untuk negara. Misi cemerlang, gemilang, terbilang. Misi cemerlang, gemilang, terbilang. UniMAP.
Baik, hadirin semua berada di tengah untuk sesi bergambar. Silakan.